pretty good.
Good.
Much better than last meeting.
Live stream's coming on there.
Did they ever get everything fixed? No?
Still working on it.
Sam. All right. Yes. Hey. Yeah, how are you? You were probably here with orange chairs.
I think I was. How are you?
Hi. Good, how are you?
Good, good.
This is Pat Lintel, our town clerk.
You look familiar. I think we've met.
I think we met before. Very good. Good to see you.
Good to see you
How
as
are you?
well. Good.
And Sam, this is Patricia Musgrave, one of
Hi,
the trustees.
Patricia.
Hi.
How are you? Nice to meet you.
Nice.
Just move my bag a little further over my shoulder. I'll be
And this is trustee Charles Rule.
Hi. Mr. Rule, how are you?
Good, and yours?
Good. I think we've met. Can we just say maybe?
Sam Light.
Sam Light.
Probably have. A few years back.
2 years back probably.
I met you at Institute,
Well, you know
at
what?
the Clerk
Clerk
Institute,
Institute,
not
okay.
this year,
I
but
got
last
it
year.
on
That's
this, so I
where
can
I.
just actually set it there. If you just
Okay.
use the arrows, so that way you can see the screen too. So
Yeah.
we'll
Can I
do that.
ask unless you need me to sit there for a record? I usually stand.
Okay, that would be fine. I just need you to speak up so the mics will catch
Oh,
you.
I will. Speaking of booming voice.
Okay. So we probably got about 20, 30 minutes of agenda stuff. Then
Oh, okay.
Then we'll be on to you.
Very good.
So agenda's right there in the corner.
Hey, hey, hey.
How you doing?
How you feeling?
It was a pretty
Heard you had some
evening,
tooth work
wasn't
done.
it?
Oh, yeah,
The live stream's on everything.
it's fun.
Hi, Sam. Oh, Mr. Musgrave. How are you? Good. How are you? Not bad. Not bad at all. Yeah. Nice to see you too.
That's-
How are you?
This is Bruce
Hi.
Miller, one of our
Sam
trustees.
Light.
Nice to meet
How
you.
are you?
I remember you.
I think we met. Trustee Sandoval, how are you? Good to meet you, Sam Light.
Hello,
How are you, Chris?
It's just
Don't
been
say
that time
spot.
of year.
Haven't moved the thing.
Just
Well,
wait
it's us two
until,
days.
well, this isn't the time of year where the time goes back. I mean, we get an hour, and we don't lose an hour, so we don't have an excuse.
I like more daylight though.
You and me both. Cause I hate that when I drive to Denver
Good.
in the morning,
Pretty
it's
good.
dark.
Then you go home and
Fall
start.
out there.
Exactly, it's like there's
Yes.
something wrong
Sorry, I
with this
missed last
picture.
Wednesday.
That's okay.
It's hard.
I
I had it in my
know.
notes. I went through my notes. It was there.
It's okay.
Just.
Hi, Jeff.
Hello. Good, you.
Good.
Yep. I'll suck it in.
How are you?
Oh, wonderful. Right there. How are you? October
His
17th.
picture.
Some time today, just happened to go in or visit with one of the other trustees, and so we just kind of talked about principles behind what they're doing.
Magnify it.
And Sam, one more snuck in on you, this is trustee Jeff Palmer over there.
Oh, hi.
Yeah, this is Sam Light.
Mr. Palmer, how are you, Sam Light?
Nice to meet you.
Hello.
What is it? Busy? You?
That's what I was wondering.
Older and gray every day.
Oh, yeah. I know what you mean. I'm showing it too. Feeling.
Yeah, I noticed that too.
Gray with a lot of tuition bills.
RH Water and Wastewater Incorporated? Is that Incorporated maybe?
It's still paying on some.
Yeah, don't rush it if you need to do.
Sewer contract operator.
No, it's all good. No problem. Okay. That's fine.
But it's been good.
Yeah.
RH Water and Wastewater.
Mayor?
I didn't know if I just love you.
Didn't wait.
Waiting for me.
Joanne?
I thought it was real there too. I was like, who's staring at me?
Did you walk in that room, or just saw him through the glass?
Saw him through the glass.
Joeen didn't want any Christmas decorations up yet because, you know, Halloween's not over yet. So when he brought that in, he just didn't, he wanted to get it out of the shop so it didn't get greasy and cat hair and stuff all over it. So he put it in Hope's office. Well, Joeen had one of those Mardi Gras masks.
Oh,
She
I
put a
see. She
Mardi
put a
Gras
Gras
mask
mask.
on him and a broomstick and Paul's like, poor Santa. Santa gone bad. Santa gone bad. We should have found some leathers. That would have been funny. Hi, Joey.
So I might ask you to cover that after you take your questions and everything at the end, just
Sure.
fill us in, because we need to know that.
Yeah, sure. Mayor, good to see you.
Good to see you.
How you been?
Great, and yourself?
Good, good.
How was the drive out?
It was beautiful. Full sunset, easy drive.
Is Brian gonna?
Much more pleasant than the 25.
We still actually got 2 minutes. That one's fast, I need to set it back. I don't know why that clock keeps creeping up on me.
What's gonna?
Will Brian be here this evening?
I think he said he was gonna be.
That's what I thought.
from him.
I know he's
There's not a
hunting. Did
train.
he come back from hunting?
I think he hunts after.
Okay.
I think he was over here.
Okay.
That would help. I always like to push the limit, but. That's right.
Thinking in style right now.
Yeah. You pay big money for it.
Gotta turn around and recycle sold for $50.
Close enough.
Good enough.
Wiggins regular board meeting will come to order. Today is Wednesday, October the 24th. Time now is 7:01. Let's go ahead and start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Staff reports, town manager, all you have
Oh,
the floor.
roll call first.
Would you like
Oh,
to?
roll call, I'm sorry.
Mayor
Getting ahead of
McLeon,
myself. Here.
Chris Sandoval,
Here.
Charles Rule,
Here.
Jeff Palmer,
Here.
Brian Becker is absent at the moment, Bruce Miller,
Here.
Pat Musgrave.
Here,
Okay, thank you. Now, the staff reports, town manager, Paul, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor Trustees. I want to start off by thanking all the volunteers that came out Monday night to help us go through all the Christmas lights and get all the wreaths working. We were actually going to start decorating here in the next few days for Christmas. We were only 37 days away from the family's Christmas celebration. That hard enough is that to believe, but we're getting really close. Our augmentation operations have stopped at the Camera Farm for the year. We got in our October deliveries and a little bit of our May deliveries. That was about it. So we got less than half of our share water in, just because of the high groundwater. We couldn't put it in during the summer months per our decree. Unfortunately, you can't make it up for other months because we have a 20-year cumulative total per month that we can't exceed, so it doesn't benefit the town to try to put extra in. However, with that, we have no issues as far as we've got plenty of augmentation water. Just that would have been help build that tell up a little bit better if we could have put some more in. The food truck ordinance that you passed should be effective now. Our staff is working, got the application done, so those are available, and I believe we do have one food truck roaming around town. And I hear it's pretty good with coffee. Just to let you know, I have met with our engineers over at Diamondback. We should have the 3rd Street drainage pump ready to bid, probably in about 2 weeks. The bid package ready to go out for bid. Also working on the glassy design, probably toward the end of November before we have that ready to go out to bid. Been also working with our legal team on the glassy, and they got our court case, probably our court filing about 95% done, and probably should be able to file that within the next 2 weeks. And once that's filed, then we can start the process for the SWSP for this project. So we'll obviously time it with what the construction table looks like. We've talked in the past about a loader, and last we talked trying to look for something used in the 50 grand range around the size that we need. I have not been able to find anything worth anything for that amount of money. It's usually 11+ thousand hours and pretty worn out for the size that we need. So I'm going to explore, obviously our immediate main purpose is to take care of the augmentation ponds and get those cleaned up. I'm going to look into see what a 2-month rental or lease or something like that would cost over the winter months, and bring that back to you probably at the November board meeting as an option. I just don't want to buy something we're going to have to put a ton of money into it. Just doesn't make too much sense at this point. Just to let you know, I've been also working with Richard Hogg, our operator in charge for our water and wastewater system, and CDPHE. They are currently in the process of finally renewing our permit for the sewer plant, so there's been a lot of back and forth questions, some technical questions about the liner, and we've been trying to finding all those files. There's not a whole lot on the stuff back then. The bid documents were pretty simple even. So we've been responding to CDPHE, so we expect that probably in the next 30 days, definitely for the end of the year, our renewal permit for the sewer plant. Just a heads up on that. It looks like they might let us keep the liner for this go-around for the wasting, which would be the largest expense. However, there's been conversations about doing a lot of soil testing in the area to see if the liner is actually doing its job. Just a heads up on that. And I think that's all I got on my end.
Okay. Any questions? Town Clerk, Matt, you have the floor.
Good evening, Mayor and Trustees. I wanted to let you know that I attended my first annual Colorado Municipal Clerks Association conference, which is part of what I need to do to become a certified clerk. So I actually, I attended, one of the things was become an Olympian of innovation, citizen and community engagement, unintentional roles of a municipal clerk, all the different things that can be asked of you. And all the other goodies. I attended the 2018 legislative update, which was really interesting with all the laws that they've changed, especially for the liquor laws. So I have a lot of reading and learning to do on that. Moving from Liquor Authority Board to a hearing officer, that was interesting. We don't really have a Liquor Authority Board. You all act as you will tonight because I have 2 liquor licenses coming through. But that was an interesting piece on whether we would want to do that or not. Basics of fund accounting, managing an organization in a sea of change, and best practices roundtable. So it was very informative. I learned that I need to learn more about liquor licensing. So there's just so many changes constantly. So, but it was good. It was good. So I appreciate the chance of being able to go, and it was really a nice time. It was in Colorado Springs, and my brother lives there, so I was able to stay with him and my sister-in-law, and that was very nice. So.
Good.
That's my report for the evening. Any questions? Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Back over to Public Works. Paul, you have the floor.
Sure, Mayor and Trustees, just want to let you know we're finally able to acquire a new Public Works truck. We got a 2012 Ford extended cab 4x4, has the box and the light bar on it. Actually was able to pick it up at auction. It's in really good shape, about 80,000 miles on it. Got it for, I believe, $9,600 and some change in that ballpark area. Do want to let you know that sewer jetting operation should start this Thursday coming up. There's a chance of a heavy snowstorm on Halloween, so depending what the roads look like. They're going to start sewer jetting, and their plan is they're going to be out on Thursdays and Fridays to start the sewer jetting. And just so the citizens know, they're going to do a section kind of over on Corona and High, because we know we have some tree roots problem there, so we want to get the camera down there and get that cleaned out. We're going to start over here on the main line on Corona and go under the railroad tracks, and then we're going to hit the whole north side of town, the Corona area side of town. So that'll be the first phase. As you recall, you guys approved a 5-year contract where they're going to do the town in sections of 5. So we're kind of going to do some of our flatter, older lines first, and we'll keep working through the system as we go through it, obviously with the newer stuff being the last thing we do. So keep a heads up for that.
Paul, one thing on that.
Yeah.
When they're running the camera down, could we have them mark out taps? Each individual tap?
On the sewer?
Yeah, and then measure it from manhole and then put it on a card file or something for future
Yeah, I
reference?
could ask them. They were going to mark, I know they were going to give us a GPS and I'm sorry, I kind of let my staff get in the middle of it. Yeah, definitely. I think that's a great idea. And obviously their camera will have the footage and the things as they go through, so that would be very helpful for us in the future, definitely finding stuff too, because that's obviously a big problem we have.
Yeah, if you ever have to do a sewer repair, it's always nice to
know
say
where
where's
the line is.
where's the tap, and then you can kind of line that up with where it comes out of the house.
I thought you enjoyed digging halfway down the alley to find
Oh yeah,
stuff.
it's fun.
I've seen you do it a couple times on that end of the street. Then the other thing we're trying to set up for December, if we can get it going, we will be doing a sewer smoke test over in Kiowa Park for the phase 1 or 2. For phase 1 and 2, phase 1, the town will take over ownership of that in February sometime, I believe, February or March, because their 2-year warranty deed would be up. Actually, we're a member of the Colorado Rural Water Association, and they have smoke testing equipment and the personnel, and they're going to come out and do that for free for the town if we can get the dates to work. And so, and the reason we're doing the smoke test is just to ensure that there's no cracks or breaks in the lines before we take ownership of it, and making sure everything is functioning on that end. Also, Public Works, just to let you know, they've been out a lot working on winterizing and maintenance of equipments and vehicles. Mark, our new employee, has really been digging in and getting some of our problems fixed with our vehicles, getting the oil changed on some things that need oil changes, and making sure the antifreeze is good in all of our generators, and we filled up everything with our winter formulas for the diesel. So I've been working on that. As a part of that process, we just discovered the generator that we have at our main transmission pump house at the 500,000 gallon tank. There's oil that's getting into the radiator, so that's going to obviously we're going to have to get on that and do some repairs. Talked with Charles a little bit. I think it might be the oil cooler that's probably causing that problem. We're also leaking oil out of the top of the turbo as well on that. So we're going to look into that, and obviously that's probably our most crucial generator. That and the RO are the two we have. So we'll start working on making sure we get any repairs we need to that done. So it's obviously a pretty big generator on that end.
I thought, excuse me a second, Paul.
That's all I had anyway, so yep.
I thought we had gone through that generator.
None in my tenure.
That was about 20 years ago. wasn't it?
No, it's been more recently, like within the last 6 or 7 years.
Yeah.
What I was thinking too.
Maybe.
Cause that one there's a Detroit, that's at Detroit, right?
It is, yep.
Yeah, we had just recently gone through that.
It's got problems again.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know how old it is. It looks fairly old when you look look at it, it's like it runs.
It is an old one,
Um,
but, yeah, I think it was about 6-7 years ago that we had gone through that.
I remember there was some work done on it, but I couldn't remember when.
You know, it runs through it. They start it every week to make sure it runs and functions. And you know, it's actually had several hours of operation on it from power being down. You'd be amazed how many times we've lost power over there over the course. But last year I think we lost quite a few times.
Okay.
So
Alrighty. Police department's not here tonight?
yeah, actually Jennifer had a pretty good report, but both Sergeant Ferguson and Corbannock are out on a priority call right now. So.
Okay.
Do you have that figures yet on their hours, Paul?
Yeah, but I do need to get with you, or
Okay.
Melinda wanted me to chat with you first before I handed those to you real quick, but
Okay.
I can get those for you. So I was
Okay.
just holding off to talk with you. Yep.
Alright. Mayor reports, I don't have anything to report this evening. Trustee reports? Special committee reports.
Sure, just let everybody know that our next Christmas committee meeting will be November 1st at 7, Joanne? 7 o'clock. 7 o'clock here at Town Hall. So again, we invite everybody to kind of participate. This will kind of be really the coordination meeting of really lining everything down of who's doing what. We know we got the horse carriage coming back this year. We will have the barrel train going this year. We'll have the same booths. I don't think we'll add a building this year. Just the Public Works is really just too behind on stuff. They just gotta get caught up on things. So anyway, looking forward. So again, anybody that can attend, please come join us. We always, you know, put a public notice out so we can have as many as trustees come that they want to. So just a good time and just visiting about how we can make Christmas better this year.
And that was at what time, Paul?
7 o'clock. That is what day is that? Is it a Monday?
It's a Thursday.
It's a Thursday. Okay.
Thank you. Anything else? Alright. Public discussion. The Board of Trustees welcomes you and thanks you for your time. If you wish to address the Board of Trustees about a specific concern or comment on an item, this is the only time set on the agenda for you to do so. We ask that you be respectful and courteous when addressing the board. When you are recognized, please step up to the microphone. State your name and address. Your comments will be limited to 3 minutes. The board may not respond to your comments this evening. Rather, they may take your comment and suggestions under advisement and provide direction to the appropriate member of town staff for follow-up. With that being said, the mic is open. When do we get a new table?
Well, I thought Sam, for his presentation, might like to sit, but he told me he wants to stand, so.
Okay.
So you
And
can
I'm
sit,
gonna stand
you can
because I
sit
don't
or
like to
stand, if you
sit.
could just come closer to the mic there. In fact,
I don't like to sit.
I can pull a chair out of there if you don't mind.
Jim Musgrave, 215 Reach Street. Mayor, my question is for Mr. Marino. I'd like to know why my water bill was so high this year, this past billing cycle. It says I used 37,000 gallons of water, and I turned my water off, my sprinklers off back in the middle of September, right after the last billing cycle. And I couldn't have used 37,000 gallons of water. And I was just wondering how that was possible.
I mean, I would have no information about your personal water bill, so you can get with Pat, and she can look it up and see what's going on.
Okay?
I'd be happy to.
And I know there are other people with the same questions, 'cause
Hey, Jim, have you had the town come look at the meter? Is
No,
it,
that's already been done.
it's a new meter. I mean,
It's
it
a
was
new meter.
replaced, was that 2 years ago?
yeah, but have you had them come look, make sure you don't have an underground leak?
Nope.
No, it doesn't.
You
You
can hear a
looked?
leak, so
We don't have a leak.
I don't have a leak. Not,
You did pop the meter though, go in and shut your bell valve off in the
Mhm.
house and make sure that there's no water running.
I did not know.
Yeah, that'd be the first step you wanna
So
try
yeah,
is that.
if you'll call, they'll come out and
Okay,
take a look at that.
okay.
Yeah, do that first.
All right. Well, then, thank you.
No problem.
Thank you.
I've got a question that, are these new meters, are they calibrated?
Mhm.
They're calibrated, what, at the factory or?
Yeah. I mean,
It's not in liters, right?
it's not liters. Yeah, and actually, as you're aware, we have meters in town that are 10 to 20 years old, and the meter style we had, according to the supplier that put them in, as they get older, they're less reliable as far as accuracy. So usually customers end up with more water than what it's metering, and obviously the new meters are hitting it, you know, on the spot.
Okay. The mic is still open.
And mine was 40,000 gallons. I think this one too.
I'll take the chair.
Okay, sorry.
Alright, I'm Durwood Darwin, 211 4th Avenue. And I too here to talk about water. First thing is, doing a little research here. How are we gonna compensate the 45 people so far that I found that gave up their wells in 1960, whatever, 70, so that the town can be a town? How are we gonna compensate them? I've been here before and asked y'all, nothing's ever happened yet, so we were promised paved roads and sidewalks. Hasn't happened yet. Okay,
Compensate
Well, what-
for,
yeah, for
yeah,
the
what,
s- for the
compensate for what?
60s?
huh?
What do you need, what do they need compensation for? The agreement
Okay,
was they gave
people
up
in
their
town
wells.
that had wells,
Yeah, they gave it up to have one combined well out there,
right.
so that there's no compensation needed. That's what happens when you
Well,
have a
we
community.
gave up the wells so that they could have town water.
And we still have
There
that
was
water.
no meters, now there's meters. Now we're paying, too much money for water. So, we were promised paved roads and sidewalks, ain't happening. Hadn't happened yet. 69 is a long time ago,
Town wasn't even incorporated in '69, Durwood.
that's when they gave up the wells.
That became an alternate point of diversion out there. They took all the wells that were in town and drilled the 2 wells out there. That became an alternate point of diversion.
Mm-hmm.
So those wells were taken as an alternate out there for an alternate point of diversion to bring water into the town. So why was there compensation needed for the wells?
We're supposed to get paved roads and sidewalks.
That's not compensation for wells.
Okay, that's what.
The water district did that in 1969. The town was not
So
even
where's the-
incorporated
when are we gonna
until
get the roads paved
1974.
And sidewalks?
It's happening
Working on
in different places.
For the people, the old part of Wiggins,
What about across the street from you?
across the street from me,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what you mean.
Right across the street on 4th Avenue.
Sidewalk.
Where'd you say you live at now?
211 4th Avenue.
And
Okay,
Mayor,
across the street.
I
It
would,
goes all the way from from Main Street clear past the park.
I would apologize to
Sidewalks.
interrupt,
What
but,
about Third, what about,
excuse me one second.
Excuse me.
I just want to interrupt to the mayor, just because of the 3-minute time limit. You may allow Mr. Darvin to kind of make his comments, and we can then respond to him, just, just to keep the meeting moving
Okay.
forward. If the trustees would just respect that, that would help.
Sure.
So, and we're at 3, but I'll go ahead and just another minute and a half to let him finish.
I got a whole list here. I don't think there's too many other people.
Got about a minute and a half, sir.
Okay, talking about water, I got a Kersey bill and I got a Wiggins bill. Same time, 6,000 gallons in Kersey, includes water, sewer, trash, and spraying mosquitoes. This was in January. Cost me $1 for mosquitoes. $101. Wiggins, and I paid for this with express bill pay, which they come up and take it out of my account and tell me how much they took. Wiggins is 4,000 gallons, no sewer, no trash, no, not sewer, water and sewer, no trash, no mosquitoes, $112.95. Yet when I pay this bill, I wanna pay it online, it costs me an extra $5 to pay it through my bank, but I have to contact them every month to tell them what the bill is. Why can't Wiggins have the same express bill pay so that if I get called out of town for 5 months, which I have before, going to Glenwood Springs, worked there for 5 months, how am I supposed to pay my water bill if I'm not here to get the mail to get this thing?
Well,
Why don't we have express bill
I'll
pay?
respond to you when you're done with your comments.
Go ahead, Paul.
It's gonna take his time away. He's got only 15 seconds left
Oh.
anyway, I guess.
Okay, go ahead.
It's up to the mayor. Okay. Our system that we have in place, it would cost the town extra to provide that because we have to go through a third-party vendor to do that. And so that would just be an extra charge that we'd have to put onto the bills to compensate for it. With that said, when I attended the State Internet Portal Authority Conference last winter, Colorado.gov, who we have our service through, they are aware of that, and they're in the process of trying to redesign their entire website and have that as an option moving forward as our provider.
So it could be a free service in the future, is what you're saying?
It could be, yeah. It, just because of our size of town, it's just a little hard to do it for
Oh,
the
I
bang for the
understand
buck
that,
because
yeah.
of the cost. Yep.
Yeah, I understand.
And of course, the 3
How
minutes
much
route there.
extra would that be to get on express bill pay?
I honestly don't remember off the top of my head. I thought it was a year and a half ago I looked at it, and it was pretty high then. So I just haven't looked back
Pretty
into
high,
it.
what does that mean? Was it
I don't
50
remember the
cents,
number.
$5, $50?
I do not remember the number, Mr. Drew.
Okay,
The mayor, or that 5 minutes here.
Okay. Thank you.
okay. Could I go over some of the other things
No,
here?
we're done.
We're done?
Yeah.
Totally done? Okay. No, there's no rain gutters, no downspouts on this building.
Thank you.
And the
Durbin, we're
street
done.
lights are strobing at
We are
Dixon,
done.
First and Corona. How do we get those fixed? We're done. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
You're welcome. Next. Okay, if there's no one else, we'll go ahead and close out that public discussion portion. We'll go ahead and move on down to the approval of the consent agenda. This is for the approval of the minutes from the October 10th, 2018 meeting, and the accounts payable in the amount of $37,982.89.
I move that we approve the consent agenda of the minutes held on October 10th, 2018, and the accounts payable of $37,982.89.
I'll second.
Motion has been made and seconded that we approve the consent agenda of the October 10th, 2018 meeting and the accounts payable in the amount of $37,982.89. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, roll call please.
Chris Sandoval,
Yes.
Charles Roll,
Yes.
Jeff Palmer,
Yes.
Brian Becker is absent, Bruce Miller,
Yes.
Pat Musgrave,
Yes.
Mayor McLeon.
Yes. The consent agenda is hereby approved. Okay, next item on the agenda is the discussion and action items. This is the SURSOP presentation.
Sure, Mayor and Trustees, Melinda Collier, Town Attorney, have reached out to Sam Light with our insurance provider, which is SURSA. They invited Sam Light to come in and just do a training workshop for the board to just help us be a more effective government. So I'm pleased to have him here, and also this is a part of our requirement that the board does periodic training to help us get some capital credits, which reduces our insurance rates over time. And Sam, would you like me to click, or would you want me to set this over there so you can?
I can click that.
Okay.
I'll just, won't bother you with that task. You're good, that's perfect.
And just the down arrow right there will
All
get
right,
you.
I'm gonna get those to pass out as well.
Sure. Thank you.
One more when you know that. Mr. Mayor and trustees, thank you very much for the opportunity to come visit. See some faces I recognize from the past and some new ones as well. So it's good to have the opportunity to come out and visit with you all. Let's see, before we start going,
Yeah, just sit down there.
Is this another one or is it the same?
There are, so
I think
for materials, I didn't mean to overload you with reading materials, and there won't be a quiz. But hopefully the stuff I handed out will be some helpful reference materials for you. And you should get a booklet with the green cover, and then there are 2 one-page handouts. And then the last thing that the town manager has, and I'll pass out here, extra copy of my slides, so that you've got those as well. So again, thank you all very much for the opportunity to come out and talk to you a little bit and do some training. So my presentation is organized around the idea of giving you suggestions as the elected officials, as the leaders of your community, on how to succeed in doing your job. Now, I'm the guy from the insurance company as well, right? And so part of what I'm going to talk about is risk management and how we reduce risk. But what I found in the almost 25 years that I've been doing this, is that if we focus on the suggestions, on how we can kind of elevate the game, and how we approach our job as elected officials, I find if we commit to good civics, good practices, good communications, good relationships with one another, then if we commit to those things, the liability stuff's going to take care of itself. Most of the risk that we worry about as your insurance company is going to go down, and quite frankly, you're going to have a much more enjoyable job, and you're going to be very successful in your job on behalf of your community. So that's why I titled my presentation Suggestions for Success. Oh, and by the way, suggestions for avoiding the risk of liability for you all as elected officials. I am going to be working, what the arrow works. I have to say this. So I've done, I think this year alone, since about April, I've done about 40 trainings, and the one thing I've realized in visiting, 2 things, in visiting communities, everyone's unique. And every community is different, and every community's got its own wonderful qualities, and I've really enjoyed going out and getting a taste of that with everyone. The more routine thing I've learned is that every community's got a different type of clicker for the slides, and I never seem to get it right. So hopefully we'll get the slides moving forward here in just a second.
Looks like the computer completely froze.
No. All right. Well, I'll tell you what, I'm going to keep going because I want to be respectful of your time. And you've got the handout there in front of you. And I'm sure the machine will be going here again in a minute. But I'm going to work both sets of slides. They are suggestions for success as a government official. I do want to work through the slides sort of efficiently because I think you'll see that it progresses kind of in a logical order. However, I do also want to make the training as helpful to you as I can. So if you've got questions, feel free to interrupt, and we'll talk about those issues as well. And then we'll reserve some time for questions at the end if I haven't worn you out at that time. And when I see the mayor going like this, I'll know my time's up, all right? So a little bit about me. Some of you probably recognize me, but my current job, I like to say I've been doing this 25 years, but really I've only been on the job for 4 weeks. So you may have recognized me because I was with the law firm of Light Kelly, which is your town attorney's firm. And I served as your primary town attorney a number of years ago, and then Melinda Cully, my former partner, took over as your primary counsel. About a month ago, I moved over to CIRSA, your insurance company, as its full-time general counsel. So I'm honored to move over there and take that position, but honored because I get the opportunity to come out and visit all the CIRSA members again and be a resource to all of you. So happy to do that. So that's enough about me. Let me tell you a little bit more about CIRSA. By the way, who's brand new on the board? I've been on the board for less than a year. Anybody less than 2 years?
Be shy, guys.
Don't be shy. All right. So we've got everybody who was elected at least in the last term, so at least 2 years of service. All right. How about maybe 48 years of service?
Definitely not that long.
There we go.
How many?
So
Previous.
48. 48. All right. We'll keep going. Anybody got more than 33 years of service as an elected official? That's my record. That's my record. If you've got more than 33 years, I'm going to go back to the trustee that I met. I think it was in Levita, and tell him that he loses. That I found somebody who's got more. Okay, nobody there. So you may have gotten some training before. You may have gone to CML. You may have Tammy Tenoy, who's now the executive director of CIRSA, may have come out. But I think whatever training you've had, it's always a good opportunity to touch base with one another on some training topics, and as a board, think about things about how we govern and how we do our business. Just a little reminder about CIRSA, right? CIRSA stands for the Colorado Intergovernmental Risk Sharing Agency. We're your insurance company. We are not a commercial insurance company. We are what we call a public entity self-insurance pool, which is quite a mouthful, but all that really means is we're an insurance company that serves and is owned by and is governed by Colorado cities and towns. Our only members, our only owners are Colorado cities and towns. Our board of directors is made up of municipal, elected or appointed officials or staff members from around the state. We've got a diverse group of board members from Lamar, Durango, so on and so forth. But we're not an insurance company. We were created by Colorado cities and towns back in the early 80s. Our current membership now stands at about 275. I need to update the number there on the slide. Of that, we've got about 270 members in the PC pool. That doesn't stand for politically correct. That stands for the property and casualty pool. And then about 145 members are in our workers' compensation pool. Do you have both workers' comp and
Yes.
Property through us? Okay. Here's the takeaway I want to leave for you all and for staff is that CIRSA is there as a resource. You know, sometimes with your private commercial insurance company, you send in the claim and that's it. You only talk to them when you have a claim. And you send in the claim, you go, oh, I guess I'll hear back sooner or later whether or not it's covered. And that'll be the end of it. CIRSA provides so much more, and we take great pride in providing you with resources to help you do your jobs effectively. And so we realize that if we help you resolve a problem before it gets worse, or help you with some loss control tips early, that's a win-win for everybody. You take care of a situation and resolve it before it could potentially get worse or cause some sort of loss. And we help keep the lost cost dollars down for you and your fellow members. So please feel free to reach out to our loss control people who can help you on things like operations. Feel free to contact other staff if you've got questions about coverages. My office is available to be a resource to your manager, attorney, and occasional questions by the board. So we're there and available. Please recognize that CIRSA has tons of resources available to the town. So feel free to take advantage of those.
I apologize, it's decided to do an office update right now.
Oh, good. All right, excellent, excellent.
You can
All
have
right.
74 if you want.
Let's keep rolling. So I'm now on the bottom of page 2 of the slide handout. I'm going to give you just a reminder of what how it's organized. We're going to talk about suggestions for good governance. These are my suggestions and suggestions that we've developed at CIRSA in the years. What do? We go to night meetings, right? We have a lot of night meetings, right? If the day isn't long enough, we'll come to a night meeting. And you know, in my 25 years of doing it, I've sort of developed these suggestions based on my years as a public entity attorney, observing the ways that elected and appointed officials either get into or stay out of trouble in the way that they do their job. So they're my observations on how you can stay out of trouble from a liability standpoint. Recognize that my training is a training resource only. This is not an attorney-client communication. I guess if I was here a month ago, it might have been, right? So I've over the years developed antenna in these trainings for you know the question of whether we got like a live issue going on. And so if we start talking a little bit and I get the sense that you're asking me questions about something that's going on in the here and now and you need some legal advice, all right, Melinda's your person. If you need staff resources on an issue, Paul's your person to get the staff resources on it. I'm happy to kick around ideas, but at the end of the day, if you need legal advice on a specific legal matter, make sure you check in with your town attorney. I think, pretty sure that a lot of the suggestions I'm going to give you are going to neatly overlap with the suggestions that staff and your attorney are giving to you, but just remember that they're there as a final answer on some of these things. One more comment. We're going to kick around some kind of, I guess, hypotheticals a little bit, and I've asked for your input. I think it's good to get that dialogue going rather than just listen to me drone on. So when I put those up there, let's get some dialogue going. And second, I think I've done enough of my homework to make sure that none of your last names show up in my hypotheticals, right? But if they do, that's purely coincidental. If any of my examples sound like something that you've got going on in the here and now, that's just purely coincidental. But I think, you know, bouncing some hypotheticals off of each other, some real life situations helps us kind of think through a bunch of issues. So you'll see we're going to do some of that as well. All right. It should go, right, Paul?
I hope.
Oh, antivirus protection. You want to renew the antivirus protection? Not today. Not right now. No. It's not my, it's on my slides. It affects the system. All right. Suggestion one, and this is, you're going to see this doesn't touch too much on liability. We're going to talk a little bit about civics here. Suggestion one to succeeding as an elected official, recognize the change in the role, right? When you get elected or appointed to public office, you're no longer just a citizen of the town of Wiggins. You are now an official. You're a government official 24/7, right? As we've come to learn, right? You're going to get the question sometimes 7 a.m. when you're in the grocery store on Saturday morning. Other times, mayor's going to get the call at 9 or 10 o'clock at night, right? Your job as a government official is a 24/7 job in the eyes of the community. Keep that in mind in the way you interact with each other and with your community. Being a government official is a 24/7 job in the eyes of the community. The hat's always on. It's not easy to take off the hat, right? And being a government official has consequences, responsibilities, risks. And so part of our training here is to reemphasize our understanding of those issues. Recognize that you're no longer an outsider to town government. You're now an insider. You're now the ultimate insider, right? You are now the government as the elected officials. Not sure why you may have gotten involved in town government, but you may have been a critic or a proponent of one particular issue that interested you. But now that you're on the board, you really don't have that luxury of just holding on to one issue or a small group of issues. As the elected officials for the town, you are now representatives of the entire town on all the issues that come before the board. And that's the great thing about local government. There's such an interesting variety of issues, right? We're going to talk about water, right? Sometimes you're dealing with water, sometimes you're dealing with some employment issues, sometimes you're dealing with tax, police, you got to run a utility, right? You got to deal with election issues. That's an exciting and broad array of stuff. But remember that you have to be a representative on behalf of the town as a whole on all of these issues. So that broader focus will help serve you well. It can be very unsatisfying if we're only focused on a single issue, right, and we're not committing ourselves to being a good representative on all the issues that come before us as trustees, right? Everybody took an oath of office, correct? I hope so. I think we did that. Okay. Got those filed. Hey, when you took an oath of office, right, what did we say? I swear to uphold the Constitution, right, and the laws of the state of Colorado and the ordinances of the town of Wiggins, right? That has legal meaning. It has a fiduciary meaning, right? We are now bound as fiduciaries of the town and legally bound to uphold a couple of core concepts, right? What does that oath embody? A commitment to respect the boundaries and allocations of responsibility set by law. What do I mean by that? Everybody within the organization has certain powers and they don't have other certain powers, right? And we, when we got elected, agreed that we would honor that, right? We put those allocations in place. What's an example? Who has the power to write a ticket in town?
Police.
Police. That means who doesn't?
Anybody else?
Anybody else?
Either in fact or appearance, right? The police have that job. That's not the trustee's job. Who's responsible? Do you issue business licenses? Who's responsible for that? Under the ordinances that you or your predecessors adopted, who's responsible for that? The clerk, right? Conversely, if there's a decision by the town to seek a new tax or incur debt or adopt some new overarching ordinance, whose job is that?
Ours.
Not his, not hers, it's yours, right? So everybody's got to understand and respect the allocation of responsibility that's set by law, by our ordinances, by our rules. The oath of office also included a commitment to lawful conduct, right? Right? We are now all local government officials. We are bound, so much of what we do is process in local government, right? And we are now, as elected officials, bound to follow the rules and apply in how we do our business and how we make decisions, right? We have, we have a license application coming in front of us, right? We have procedures in place. We have criteria in place. Why do we do those things, right? because as government officials, we are obligated to give people due process. Right? No person shall be deprived of property without due process of law. Who's responsible for administering that provision of the Constitution? All of us, together, right? And doing it in a way that respects people's rights, that does it fairly, that reaches a sound decision. It may not be, it's a tough job. Some decisions you're gonna make are not gonna make everybody happy. It's that old adage, you can't make 100% of the people happy 100% of the time, right? But we gotta do it by following a fair and proper process, and so you're a very important part of doing that. Your oath of office also included a commitment to ethical practices. We're gonna talk a little bit about the fact that each of us is now bound to follow the Colorado Code of Conduct, which is the ethical rules for elected officials and public employees. This last one, maybe this doesn't fall directly out of the oath, but the Board of Trustees is what? It is but one board, right? It's got 7 members. So if we're to get anything done, isn't there kind of implicit in our oath a commitment to at least have courtesy and respect for each other's diverging opinions and viewpoints? Because at the end of the day, we gotta make a decision as a board. We don't have 7 boards, we got one board with 7 members, right? From where staff sits, it shouldn't matter all that much whether your decision is a 4-3 vote or a 7-0 vote. But we as trustees have to commit ourselves to working together enough to get a decision made, clear decision made as a board. We don't have the luxury of saying we are all independent of each other and have our own powers, because we're gonna learn here in this presentation and emphasize again, we don't. We are but one board, and each of us is a part of that board. Right? Remember this as well, whatever role you had previously, right? You may have, before you got on the board, been a member of a citizen committee, or you may have had no role with government, but were just active on some particular issue. But at this point, you're now all the elected leaders, the guardians, the stewards of the town. The town is a corporation. The town is a community, right? You're really analogous to the board of directors of a corporation, right? Municipal corporations are probably the only corporations that have been around for 100 years or more, particularly these days, right? But you're a corporation, and you're analogous to the board of directors of a corporation from a very large perspective. Probably your job, your most important part of your job as the board of directors, nobody else can be the board of directors, you gotta be the board of directors, is to protect the town's interest and assets as a whole. You're the folks uniquely qualified to protect the town, its interest and its assets as a whole. That's probably your most critical function. And that probably means that, in a very writ large perspective, the guiding principle in your decision making is what is the best thing to do for the town. As you know, sometimes that's gonna not square necessarily with what you're hearing, right? You may have a small vocal group of citizens that says, do this. But that may not square with what's the best thing to do for the town. And sometimes that's tough. But remember, what's the best thing to do for the town? Sometimes you may face the suggestion that we ought to do this right now in the moment, and that'll fix this problem. But if you think about it, that fix isn't gonna stand the test of time. That's just gonna get us in more problems. Or that's gonna be something if you have the sense that we're gonna make that decision and we feel like it's gonna take care of this pressing issue, but I'll tell you what, we're gonna come back at the next meeting and we're gonna still have the same issue, right? Take the luxury, because you as the board have the luxury and the power to do this, to take the time to get the information that you need to make decisions that you think are going to be in the best interest of the town and stand the test of time. And that's success, really, right? Not making decisions that create more difficulty, or making decisions that the next board is gonna overturn, or making a decision that 6 months from now you can say, we gotta undo that, or that didn't feel good. So take that luxury, because you do have that, usually you do have time. Sometimes a little frustrating to you and your citizens when it feels like it's a bureaucracy and it takes a long time, but take the time you need to make good, sound decisions. To be effective and avoid the liability risk, remember that you're now part of a collective decision-making body. And I said we're 7 trustees. Well, okay, so that means I hold 1/7 of this power. Is that right? right? If the town board is required to approve a contract, can you do it individually? No, right? If we say it takes a vote of the board to pass an ordinance, you don't hold that power individually, right? Right? So it's not really true that we hold a fraction of this power. To the extent we might think we do, we hold a fraction of the power of the board as a board, and that power as the board of trustees cannot be exercised by any individual trustee alone. It has to be exercised by the board as a board, right? So success from where you sit is building a sound, strong board of trustees, right? That's still consistent with the idea that once in a while we may disagree with each other. We could still have a strong board and have split votes, right? We could still have a strong board and reach defensible decisions and have policy debates with each other, right? But we have to commit to making the board stronger. It also means that success in your position can't happen without collaboration or consensus building, right? If I'm a trustee and my individual issue is I'd like us to tighten up our nuisance ordinance, right? I can think that all day long as a trustee, but I gotta find at least 3 trustees that wanna come along with me, right? Or we're not gonna get there as a board, right? And it's very dangerous to think that you can get there individually, right? That's what exposes you to these liability risks. If we're individual trustees striking out on our own, thinking that we have individual power to do things as a town, right? So if you find yourself thinking in terms of I, as a government official, I'm gonna do this, don't worry about the rest of the board, that's a huge liability exposure for you. You need to be very careful about that. So just remember that success requires collaboration with each other, and you can get that done, no doubt about it. Remember that another part of the job as elected officials, maybe part of your job duties is good leadership, right? And I found over the years that is based both kind of practically and legally on committing to a few core civics principles. So let's step over here. I found that if we commit ourselves to these kind of civics principles on the left-hand side, then the corresponding legal issues will take care of themselves, right? What do I mean by that? Well, let's commit ourselves to openness and transparency. If we do that, we are very unlikely to have problems under the Open Meetings Law or the Open Records Law, right? Recognize that as an elected official, we are legally bound by certain concepts of openness and transparency, such as we need to have public meetings when required, right? We need to follow the Open Meetings Law. We need to recognize that as elected officials, most of what we write, for example, in an email, could potentially be a public record. So we need to be circumspect in how we use email, how we communicate as elected officials. We need to commit ourselves to fundamental fairness. Why? Because the Constitution requires that you provide due process. No doubt about it. And if we don't provide it, it's a huge liability risk, eventually for you individually and for the town. So I found this idea of fundamental fairness at the end of the day means we might have a difficult meeting. And it might have been a difficult decision. And there might be people who go home and say, until the end of the time, I'm not going to agree with the decision the board made. But if they leave that meeting saying, oh, I understand they got a tough job now. I understand there were, many, many sides to that issue. But I feel like I was heard. I had the opportunity to be heard. The board respected my opinion. They made a tough decision, and now I respect that decision. If they go home thinking that, yeah, it was a good process, even if they disagree with the substance of the final decision, if they believe that it's a fair process and they got a fair shake, much less likely to have legal issues flow from that kind of process. So, commit yourselves to being predictable, right? This is particularly important for the business community. Nothing can sow the seeds of potential dissent and dispute than if there's a vibe, circling around town that says, well, I go into town hall and I asked for this or that, and this is what I was told, and this is how and I got my permit or my license, and then somebody else is saying, wait a second, I'm in the same situation, but I don't feel like I'm being treated the same, okay? So make sure we apply our rules predictably and consistently. If we don't like the rule, and it's legally permissible to change it, we can do that, but you can't do it on the fly. Right? And you can't just make them up, and you don't want to have debates with each other that says, what's our rule, in terms of then creating a rule out of thin air, right? again, take time to make sure that you have good rules in place. If you don't have a rule on something and you need it, then let's do that to protect ourselves, to protect you individually, right, to protect the town. But make sure we follow and apply our laws and our ordinances. And then finally, mutual respect kind of touches on that point I just made. All right, any thoughts, suggestions on that stuff? Let me pivot a little bit to a more legalistic concept. So when you got elected, did you call Melinda, one of the first things elected officials might do after you get elected, you call up the town attorney and say, can I get sued? The answer is,
Well,
sure.
yeah, everybody should, yeah.
Sure, everybody can get sued. The question becomes, do they actually have a claim, right? And so I hope it wasn't your first question on taking office, but it's a natural question because you're saying, I'm now a government official, and government officials have new rights and responsibilities, so can I get sued in this position? The answer is yes, you can get sued. But let me tell you, just remind ourselves what the background is on the legal protection that you have, okay? So in Colorado, we've got the statute called the Colorado Governmental Immunity Act. And what it basically says is that the town is a corporate entity, and then by extension, its insurance company, is obligated to defend you and pay judgments that are entered against you for your conduct as an elected official. Well, that sounds pretty good so far, right? So long as, these are the big caveats, so long as you are acting within the scope of your employment and not acting in a willful and wanton manner. Okay? So the good news is you are protected as long as we understand and honor what our job description is, and we don't act in a willful and wanton way. Those are kind of two weird concepts. Let's touch on what's, I said scope of employment. You might be thinking, well, why? I'm not an employee. How does that apply to me? Right? That's the phrase that's used in the state law. It does apply to you. It applies to Paul, right, and Patricia. The idea of scope of employment applies to everyone who does anything on behalf of the town, elected officials, appointed officials, staff, and volunteers, okay? And what it means is that everybody needs to know and respect their job description. So that's what scope of employment is, okay? The other weird phrase was willful and wanton. What does that mean? Anybody got a guess? Okay. Go ahead, Paul.
I guess acting willfully out of your scope.
Yeah, so I got a good sort of, I think I got a good sort of everyday way of looking at it. Willful and wanton conduct is bad stuff. That's what it is. It's bad stuff. It's using the power of government or using your perceived power as a government official to intentionally harm someone. To set out with an intent or design to actually intentionally damage someone. Bad stuff. What do I mean by that? Let's do, now they sort of tease that out. What's an example? Maybe I'm a trustee and I got somebody on the other side of town that is my business competitor and I don't like it. So now I get this power of government. Maybe I'm not thinking right, and maybe I'll enlist a staff member, I don't know, building department official who's also not thinking right, or just is worried that if he doesn't go along, there might be some consequence. And the two of us go on a campaign to say, let's go get that guy. Let's order some improper inspections. Let's go tell Patricia and make sure he doesn't get a business license. Let's go tell the police, hey, make sure he gets a ticket if he's got any junk in his yard. What is all that stuff? Bad stuff. That's purporting to use the power you hold as a government official to wrongfully and intentionally harm someone. And that's going to get you in big trouble, right? Because that kind of conduct, willful and wanton conduct, is the kind where you might lose the protections under the statute. The statute says the town will defend you and pay judgments as long as your conduct is not willful and wanton. So we all need to be reticent and engage in some self-reflection to make sure we're doing the right things for the wrong reason. We're doing the right things for the right reason and not doing the wrong things for the wrong reasons, right? Don't do bad stuff. That's easy, right? We're going to stay away from that, but we got to keep our eyes up, and we have to kind of self-police each other. We have to be honest with ourselves that if things are going off the rails, we got to stop, right? Or we're going to expose ourselves individually to a massive liability risk. And as I said, those protections don't apply. You don't have the ability to assert governmental immunity if your conduct was willful and wanton. This next slide is my
Hey,
group.
hey, Sam, I
Yeah.
apologize, can I just a question, because I think a real live scenario here, and I'm not sure what the right way for the board or me to respond to that. Recently, some people come forward and they complain about the neighbor's yard having too high weeds or trash or something like that at a board
Yeah.
meeting. And obviously, that's a function our police department takes care of. How should my board and how should staff respond? Generally, we say we'll look into that. Sometimes the conversations may get into details. Where should we draw the line when a citizen brings something before the board about another citizen? Fair.
I find, there's two things in that. The first on, like the nuisance law, and actually I have a hypothetical on this, is, if you say, of course, it's the police's job, it must mean that this board at some point adopted an ordinance that said that's how the process works.
Correct.
And they must have adopted an ordinance to say that that was the police's job because your town attorney or somebody reminded you that constitutionally you want to have a process to deal with that. You don't want to have these issues simply decided by the board as a political matter because they're not. Why not? Because people's property interests are involved, right? So, in that regard, I think the answer to that question is we don't get involved in the administration of the nuisance ordinance because we've already delegated that function to the police department, right? Now the other part is the folksy part. If someone's standing up there in public comment and complaining about their neighbors, I usually find there's always more than one side to the story, right? And your slide's no longer up, but it said during public comment what you do is receive comments, right? And then they may be referred to the appropriate staff for feedback. And that's really where you ought to leave it, because if it's a function that's already been delegated to staff, you shouldn't take over that issue as part of public comment. You should support the system you've already put in place. So it would be, thank you for your comments. Our manager or the police department or the public works department is responsible for that issue. The mayor can turn to the manager and say, I ask that you follow up with public works, and they'll respond to the comment, right? And I know that can be tough, and I know that citizens, we had one tonight, they ask you questions and demand an answer, but it may well be that, in fact, some time needs to be taken to understand what the issue is, right, and what the appropriate response is. So I would commend you to make sure that you honor that system. I know sometimes it can be frustrating for a citizen to stand up and say, I've got a question I want an answer now, but to be fair to yourself, you may not know the answer. And it's the first time you're hearing the question, right? And it may not even, and one reason it may also be the first time you're hearing the question is because you've already got a system in place where somebody else is responsible for that. So use your staff to help you look good. You take the question, say, okay, thank you for your comment. Paul, could you look at that issue? He can look at that issue, follow up. When the answer is finally arrived at and delivered, he can circle back and say, just want to let you know I responded to that citizen, and let them know how this or that was resolved. In my hypothetical, we're going to talk about the dangers of involving yourselves in administrative matters that aren't yours to administer. That can be a big risk factor for you.
And with that, and I'm sorry to interrupt, but because we have that come forward a lot, is it appropriate or okay if after that citizen comes forward, obviously, we'll refer that to the town manager if that's the response. Is it okay for them as an individual, say after the meeting or status, say, hey, I just want to let you know, you might just take a look at this, because we have a very diverse council, we got an expert in accounting, an expert in plumbing, and expert, business owner, and work in lumber and things. Is that okay for them? Can I communicate with them as a resource, or can they communicate with me long as they're not trying to influence what we're doing, just as a resource?
Yes.
After the fact, privately.
You can. I remember this, that if you're asking a question and you're presumably doing it as a board member, at the end of the day, you may have other board members who are interested, right? And part of your responsibility as a board is to honor the structure that you have as a board. So yeah, it may be appropriate that sometimes a one-on-one communication is helpful to make an inquiry or get some questions answered. And we're going to talk about open meetings as well. It's also not prohibited by law, and I encourage it to, trustees can meet one-on-one to build relationships and understand each other's philosophies of governing and build a good rapport and all in terms of building a better board, right? But those are markedly different than involving ourselves individually in matters that have already been assigned to somebody else, right? And that's where the kind of line is from exposing yourself to liability risks. And then, Paul's got to exercise judgment that if one of you reaches out to him and say, I have this issue, he's got to do kind of a part of his lift is he gets to manage the board in a certain way, right? Do I have an issue that I need to bring back to the full board? And if he does, if one of you approached him with this issue and he said, I can look at it, but ultimately I'm going to need direction from the board, then we all have to honor the idea that Paul just doesn't necessarily do it because one trustee says do it, if it's a board issue, right? So you'll have that dynamic going on sometimes as well.
So like, let's say if, somebody comes up to you and says, well, I got a list of stuff right here I think that needs done in this town.
Mm-hmm.
Can you accept that list and say, hey, I wanna give this to my town manager or something like that? Would that be within,
Yeah.
council member scope?
Yeah. Yeah, at the end of the day, part of your tough job as a board is you probably get inquiries and lists like that from a lot of citizens. At the end of the day, you've got to make decisions about how you allocate resources and what your priorities are, right? And so with those kind of lists, if you're gonna, if the citizen has a right to petition you for grievances, right? So they can present you with the list at any time, and we should never gainsay that they don't have the right to do that. They do. But the question becomes how we then manage that, right? And to be respectful of the idea that we're a board and we operate as a board and we have to allocate the public resources which are finite. Seems to me you would take that list, and if you were, and you said, oh, okay, Paul, I had a citizen provide me with a list of things that the town ought to look at, and Paul can look at them and decide, he's your administrator, right? Decide which ones, how they get prioritized, and so on, right? Remember, in this world of limited resources, you probably have to decide as a board, how much time you're gonna spend on responding to crisis, or responding to small issues, and how much time you're gonna spend on big issues, right? As the leaders and visionaries of the town, right? As a corporate board, you probably wanna spend some portion of your time working on the big issues, and not necessarily have all your service driven by responding to the smaller issues that come up, right? So they do need attention, and you got administrative staff to help. If somebody presents you a list and says, I need to know where these are at, then that's Paul's job to help with that. Right? I don't know if you have thoughts on these. To go back to my idea, just to drive the point home, if you get a list, and you get a list, and you get a list, and they're all different lists, right? And we all think they need to be done, but we're only individually thinking, say, take care of my list. Where's the breakdown? The board, as a board, has to decide what the list is. Right? So you gotta set aside time to think about priorities and what's on the work plan and what's not on the work plan. Right? And as you grow, you're gonna have more and more pressures to put a lot of things on the work plan. You just have to be realistic about which ones you can tackle at any one time. Right? Is that right?
Yeah.
All right, so this is my Grim Reaper slide. I'm gonna, and I always feel bad when I give you the Grim Reaper slide, but I need to give it to you. And then I'm gonna hopefully finish with a silver lining. So conduct that's willful and wanton in particular can be very bad from a liability standpoint because it can result in the loss of insurance coverage. Again, remember the statute says the town will defend you and pay judgments as long as your conduct is not willful and wanton. So your insurance policies follow the same idea. They basically say, we will cover you and protect you as elected officials for things that you do within the course of scope of being an elected official, so long as your conduct is not willful and wanton. And all public entity insurance coverages have that kind of exclusion that says, hey, if the other person was damaged because of your intentional willful and wanton conduct, or because of fraud, or some ill-gotten gain, those kinds of bad stuff, then you may lose your insurance coverage, and the worst possible scenario is you could be held individually responsible for paying a judgment entered against you because you were doing something that was way off in left field that you weren't supposed to be doing as an elected official. Okay? So keep those principles in mind. By the way, Colorado law does not allow public entities or public entity insurance companies to essentially pay punitive damages that are entered against an individual, so that's another risk factor. That all means just keep our eyes open and stay away from bad stuff. Don't do improper things for improper motives, right? Here's the silver lining, on the other hand. Don't let the fear of liability drive your decision making, right? If we're making the right decision through a good process, and we know we're making a defensible decision, right, under defensible standards, then we're gonna be just fine. Don't get whipsawed into making a bad decision for the wrong reasons just because you're being threatened with a lawsuit. Right? And that's what your town attorney in particular is there to remind you if you've got a particularly difficult decision and it feels like people are threatening us from every angle that we're going to get sued. Consult with your attorney. If we reach the conclusion that, hey, we're making the right decision, it was a defensible decision, then if you go the other way just because someone's threatening you, in all likelihood you might just get attacked from the other direction. Right? So don't let the fear of liability drive what you're doing. All right, here's a couple of suggestions just to stay away from the bad stuff. Remember what's our job description as trustee and what's not. I'm going to give you a couple of easy examples. If it's the police chief's job to write a ticket, then I as an elected official am not telling the police chief to write tickets. I'm not going out and telling people to do or not do things that a law enforcement officer is supposed to tell them, right? That kind of stuff. So understand the job description and stay within it. Before acting, make sure you have authority to act, particularly if you're thinking, I'm going to do something as an individual. Oh, I'm an individual trustee, I have this governmental power, I'm going to do this. Pause and think, do I really have the authority to do this? Right? Okay? Recognize that you do your job as trustees primarily by meeting in this room and voting as a group. I would encourage you to come to love that. It gives you a chance to build stronger relationships with each other, with the community, right? It's also from a liability standpoint where you are most protected. Very, very hard for someone to allege that you're acting individually for improper motive when you're sitting here as 7 trustees doing it together, right? Right? Yeah. So if you're doing anything other than voting in a public meeting as a group of 7, make sure you're authorized to do what you're doing, okay? A couple other ways, kind of useful tools to avoid the bad stuff. Think in terms of we, not I. We as a board would like to do this, not I am a trustee and going to do this. If you find yourself thinking in terms of I rather than we, that's a red flag. Be careful after you voted on a matter. If we had one of those 4-3 votes, you don't have, and you were on the 3 side, you don't have to be the ultimate cheerleader for the decision, right? And you could probably still say I disagreed with the board's decision, but you're part of the board. You can't begin a campaign to undo the vote. You have to respect the vote that was cast. And recognize that some decisions can't be undone without liability. If we hire a contractor to plow the streets, and we had a debate about that's a waste of money, let's do it, not do it, but we decided 4-3 to award the contract. We hire that person, they start doing the work, what's the consequence? We owe them. We owe them, And if I don't like that contractor, I can't bring up on the agenda at the next meeting, maybe with 2 of my other trustees who don't like the guy, and say, I'd like to make a motion that we revoke the contract. Right? That's bad stuff. If the person isn't performing and the contract allows us to hold them accountable for non-performance, yes. But once we approve a contract and incur liability, we got to honor our liability, right? So just recognize those points. All right, so just to keep moving along, you're probably at this point thinking, well, why is the SERSA guy up here telling me all this stuff about, I got to understand and respect my role and why, role discipline is so important. So here are some real live examples that show how you as elected officials can kind of get in trouble in these areas, and these are all based on real live cases that we have. And all in view, it's kind of driving home the point of everyone needs to respect and understand their job. Some of these cases that we see is, you can get into trouble if you have an elected official who directs or gets involved in a personnel decision that's entrusted to somebody else. We probably have in our structure here maybe a public works foreman that right? And then some operations guys? Probably?
Correct.
And we've probably got an organizational structure that says the foreman is their supervisor. So who's not their supervisor? Right? So we've had employment cases where we have that kind of situation, the equipment operator gets terminated, and we go to the foreman. That's what we do, is, you know, because attorneys were thinking, let's go talk to the foreman, because the organizational chart and all the rules that were put in place says that the foreman is the supervisor. I go to the foreman, we interview him, we say, okay, why'd you fire this guy? He says, I didn't want to fire him. Is that a good start? Because the next question I said, well, then why did you get fired? Oh, you know, some other people told me to fire him. And then we start asking questions. We go, well, who are these other people? It was a member of the planning commission that didn't like the guy, you know? Or it was now we're off to the races in trying to defend a case where basically we gotta admit that the system was completely jacked up because the people who were supposed to be making decisions weren't making it, right? And people who purportedly were not supposed to be involved in the decision were making it. What's the legal problem with that? Lack of authority, due process, right? So we gotta honor that. So that's one example of that. The other thing they look out for is sometimes we get claims where people say allegedly that an elected official made a promise. This one I don't worry so much about your individual liability exposure, except in these terms. Sometimes you'll be having conversations with constituents, and if you get the vibe that's kind of reading more into what you're saying than you really intend, then just remember to slow them down. Because we get claims like that once in a while. Somebody will sue a city or town and will say, well, why do you think the town owes you money? Well, because that city council member said so. And it's like, well, no. Only the city council can bind the city, right? But avoid that difficulty by, if you're ever having conversation with the constituents and they feel like, and you're feeling like, hey, this person's gonna go out and rely on what I'm saying, or they're misunderstanding that this is really a board decision. It's just as simple as saying, hey, thanks for your feedback, you know, that's really a board issue. And we're happy to listen to you if you'd like to come to a board meeting and present your idea to the board, but I don't have any power to say you can or can't do that. I don't have any power to say go out and do this, and that'll serve you well, okay? The other kind of cases we see is if an elected official interferes with a routine item that's the staff's responsibility. So like building permits, who issues those? The building official, right? You might make your decision on the land use, this subdivision is or is not okay, but once you approve the subdivision, it's not the board's responsibility to issue the building permits, right? So you don't wanna involve yourself in that if that's not your job. I got a real live example on that. I had a land use case. It was a tough case. It was a 4-3 vote. The consequence of the decision was that the developer could then go and get their building permits and develop. My mayor, who was on the 3 side of the 4-3 vote, after the vote was cast, went over to the building department a couple days later and said, hey, by the power vested in me as mayor, I'm telling you not to issue the building permits. Good idea? Bad idea. Bad stuff. Right? I got a little nervous because I got to tell the mayor, hey, mayor, can't do it. Right? So if it's already been delegated to somebody else to make the decision, I really encourage you to actually enjoy that and respect and enjoy that fact, because if the building permits are the responsibility of the building official, then building permits should not end up on your agenda, and you should not be making those decisions. And that's a two-way street. You know, what if my building clerk in that case said, wow, there's no way I'm gonna issue these building permits knowing how ticked off the mayor is, right? And then all of a sudden, you know, application for a building permit starts showing up on your agenda. The system's it's jacked up that way, just running a different direction. So we each need to honor and support the allocation of responsibility. Sometimes that means your clerk might have to make a tough decision. But if you've already said it's her job, then we have to honor and support the fact that it was her job. She may give you a heads up and say, hey, just want to let you know I had to issue a business license for, I don't know, whatever, a smeltering plant. but it is a lawful business within the district, and just wanted to give you a heads up. She's not inviting you in to make the decision for her, she's just giving you a heads up that as part of the job that you gave her, she's responsible for making that decision. So the last thing I wanted to point out was, Mayor, do you, David, we may not have it. Do you have reports by the trustees at the end of the meeting? You go down the dais and we all, make a comment.
That's up at the front.
Oh, okay. So when we get to if we do that and you say, okay, let's go up and down the dais, and it says, Trustee Miller, what have you been up to since the last meeting? And if the response to that is this, you did what? That's when you as a board have to take ownership of that issue and slow down, talk to each other about what are our expectations for how we as board members act on behalf of our town in between the meetings, right? And you should have that discussion, because it shouldn't be, you shouldn't have disputes over you did what. We should feel, and I'd want to feel supported if I was a trustee, if you guys said, Mayor, go talk to the county, okay? The mayor would want to know that he's got your direction and support to do that, and he'd want to feel supported when he came back and said, I did what you told me to do, right? But if we're operating in this amorphous gray area where in between meetings, I don't know whether I have authority to do it, I don't know what the other trustees would think about it, you need to stop that and talk to each other about what our expectations are, or how we act as trustees in between meetings. And I think your code of conduct says that. So spend some time doing that, that's a good thing to do. Here's an example of that. Let's go over this hypothetical together. At your annual retreat, the board gave direction to staff to work on the nuisance ordinance to expand the list of what is a nuisance. We admittedly have an increasing problem with junk in the front yard, but our ordinance isn't clear yet on whether junk in the front yard is a nuisance. Board member Smith, and this is, not the part of your job, you're gonna get calls at home. Board member Smith has been getting numerous calls about the junk at Hopper's house. Smith wants something done and confronts Mr. Hooper, telling him, hey, clean up your mess and the town will do it. Time drags on a little bit and trustee Smith finally decides, hey, I'm just gonna go over and tell one of the equipment operators, take a trailer over there and get rid of that junk. And it happens. And we haul off, some stuff that looks like junk, a bunch of old lumber and some auto parts. And then, Hopper, obviously is incensed about this. He shows up at your board meeting to complain, and Smith says, hey, Mayor, I'd like to make a motion, would you please cut this person off? We don't need to hear from him, tell him to be quiet and leave the meeting. That vote passes. Do we have problems here? Do we have individual liability problems? Yeah. There's this concept under federal law that says an elected official shall not, and it can face individual liability for violating the well-established constitutional rights of the citizen. And two of their well-established constitutional rights are that they shall not be deprived of property without due process of law. That's why we have a nuisance ordinance to provide a process. It's not a process for an individual trustee to just say, I'm gonna get rid of your stuff. Okay? And then the other well-recognized right under federal law is the right to petition the government for grievances. So when a person, by the way, are you legally obligated to provide your 3 minutes for public comment?
Legally obligated.
Yeah. No, you're not legally obligated to do it, but everybody does it because it's an opportunity to hear from your citizens. We want that opportunity. We respect the right of citizens to come and tell us what their concerns are. But that is one of the most highly protected forms of First Amendment speech. So we have a 3-minute rule, we have our rule to be respectful, direct your questions to the board. That's all perfectly appropriate, right? But if we don't tell people you're done because we don't like the content of what they're saying, right? We just have our 3-minute rule, we follow it consistently, right? And that's the rules of the game for everyone, right? And that's where that balance is struck, right? But Smith would be in big trouble here if the evidence came in that was what his design was, right? So be careful of that.
And Sam, real quick, on the 3-minute rule, is there any issues some people go over? Is it okay for the mayor to allow extra time? Does he need to allow that? And if we do that for one, we gotta do it for the 20 behind? How does that, as far as freedom of speech, play into it?
So we can dance around the margins and all that stuff. I'm just gonna be very frank about the rules. If you have a 3-minute rule, approve it and apply it consistently and that's it. Because we know that the rule on content is basically, since it's the most protected form of free speech, it's your opportunity to say in 3 minutes whatever you'd like to say to your government leaders, right? So the only limitations are really the 3 minutes, right, and not disrupting the meeting, right? So I think it's important that we follow that consistently, and and then we have ways to deal with that issue, right? Make sure people understand that they're approaching the 3-minute limit, right? Frankly, if the rubber hits the road and someone's not stopping at the 3 minutes, what I would recommend to you is you just adjourn. Take a break. Right? That's better than forcing an issue to conflict, right? And I've had situations where, 3 minutes versus 3 minutes and 10 seconds, that's not going to be a huge problem, right? But it's, the way these things come back to haunt you is if you say we have a 3-minute rule, then all of a sudden we've got a difficult subdivision application coming in, right? And the applicant ends up getting 7, 9, 10 minutes. And then we've got dozens of people that want to testify against, and now all of a sudden we start enforcing the 3-minute rule. That's where you get into trouble. So every community habituates itself in that. I was until recently the Louisville city attorney, and we worked together as a team, and frankly as a community, to habituate each other on that's how the council operates. We have a 3-minute rule, we have a clock, we tell people thank you for your comments, we don't engage back and forth. And quite frankly, if there's good follow-up, then it usually works for 99% of the folks.
So with that being said,
Yeah.
they have 3 minutes to lay everything out on the table. Okay? And after their 3 minutes is up and they sit down, that doesn't mean that it's over. That means that now at that point we can start answering some of their questions.
You can if you want, but I'll remind you of your own self-adopted rule. It says that we typically don't respond. Right? It says we take those matters, I don't remember what the slide said exactly, but it basically said we take those matters under advisement. And to be fair to yourselves, if the item's just showing up right then and there, don't you want to take the time to get some good information? Maybe if it's if it's something that can be answered quickly and we're certain what the answer is, somebody stands up and says, when will 5th Street be open? When will the construction project be over? It's, Paul, can you give us a quick update on the 5th Street construction? And you can say, here's where it's at, it'll be open next week. On the other hand, if it's an open-ended question about, some broad topic that's got many policy perspectives and you don't have good information, it's probably not worthwhile to take it up that night because number one, you don't have good information. Number two, in your world, you always got to be concerned about the empty chair. If the item's not listed on the agenda, and it's an issue of interest to the community, you have to remember there are not people in the audience who might be interested in that issue if it were listed on the agenda. Right? That's why sometimes if somebody brings up a new policy issue, it's maybe better to say, hey, thank you for that comment. Appreciate your interest in substitute water supply plans. Paul, when do we have opportunity on the agenda to talk about that issue, and citizen know that we'll have this on the future agenda. Right. But usually I find if it's a touchy subject that requires some good information to make sure we're operating on good information, it really doesn't have to try and resolve it right then and there because it won't get resolved.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right, let's turn the corner a little bit and talk about suggestion 3 here is protect the town's confidences. Generally we're going to talk in a minute about how you do most of your work openly and through a public meeting process, but there are situations where confidentiality is not only legally defensible, but it's also in the best interest of the town, and that's stuff like litigation, personnel matters, and issues that are being negotiated. So make sure that your systems for protecting confidential information are known and understood and honored by the board, right? And that your rules are followed. You can only hold executive sessions for limited purposes. Use executive sessions only when necessary, right? I find over my 25 years that if you're one of those communities that uses executive sessions all the time, they still may be legally defensible, right? But there may be this vibe getting out there that there's things being done in executive session which is impermissible, right? So use executive sessions sparingly. Make sure you follow the script. You've had it with Melinda. Be patient. be nice, be kind to her, she's doing all that for a reason, and that is the law requires you go through that exhaustive script. It seems exhaustive, right? But it's important you do that to make sure that you properly convene the executive session. And then when you're in executive session, that's a confidential discussion, and you as a board decided you were gonna go in there for the purpose of maintaining the confidentiality of the discussion. So maintain that as confidential unless and until you as a board decide what are we gonna do with what we discussed, right? And here's an example on that. So let's say we're in executive session and the board, maybe we're in there for matters subject to negotiation. When we're developing a strategy to negotiate the purchase of an old ice rink, if we're successful in buying it, we're gonna turn it into a public rink. Also, if we're able to buy it, we're gonna have to hire somebody to manage it. So we get an appraiser's report that says the property is worth between 175 and 225. The board consensus in the executive session is to instruct the mayor and the town manager to go meet with the landowner. So board member Jones, who also manages a private gym and intends to propose a contract with the town to manage the rink if we're able to buy it, sees the landowner the next day at the coffee shop, eager to get things going, says, hey, we had an executive session last night and we talked about, potentially buying your property. The town's willing to pay you 200. And you know what, I think, maybe they'll go as high as 225. What's the problem with that? Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't want to be Trustee Jones, because now, next meeting, I gotta go back and explain to my board, why did I let the cat out of the bag? What's the good in having an executive session for negotiation strategy if you throw your strategy out the window because one of us lets the information go? Right? So I know executive sessions usually happen late in the meeting, but I always recommend you do this, particularly on matters subject to negotiation. Before the executive session is over, go around one more time and say, look, we've had a lot of information here. We have a discussion of a pretty sensitive topic. What among the confidential information that we discussed leaves this room, and who's our spokesperson? And that's your fiduciary responsibility to each other as the elected officials of the town, is to determine how we're gonna protect confidential information. So go around the horn one more time. Paul, you got your direction? Okay, who's gonna go? What else leaves this room? Do we just, don't say anything more than 200,000, right? Maybe, hey, and also don't let them know that we're looking at other potential properties. Right? Those are all important things. If you believe it important enough to go into executive session, you gotta put the effort into to make sure you protect confidences. So go around the horn one more time before the session's over and confirm what information leaves the room and who are your spokespeople. A couple other points just on this slide. Recognize that if you have an executive session for the purpose of purchasing real estate, you still, if you have a conflict of interest, you can't participate in the executive session for the purposes of failing to disclose that you have a conflict of interest, right? So you still gotta make your disclosure, and you should be recusing yourself, right?
So should they step out of the room?
Yeah, and this is way back in time, but I've been surprised when I had an executive session once with the town, and everybody participated, and then I came to learn later that one of the people who's had an executive session actually had an interest in the properties. I said, we can't do that. The state law expressly says that you can't hold the executive session for discussion of property matters if it has the effect of failing to disclose a conflict of interest. So you gotta, on the record outside, disclose, hey, I'm the owner of the property that's gonna be discussed, I need to recuse myself and leave.
Do you see any towns that for their executive sessions do it in a special called meeting versus, like, these poor guys usually draw on the executive session about 11 o'clock at night, it's really hard, cause usually the executive sessions are levels of stuff up,
Yeah, we
way up here.
do. I can't remember, I was poking through your code of conduct, I can't remember if they had a specific point on that, but as long as your local rules allow it, you could call a special meeting to start at 6 o'clock. To have your executive session if you wanted, if you felt like you'd rather put that energy on that issue earlier in the night. But just make sure your local rules allow it. There's nothing in the state statute that would prohibit it.
Okay.
Yeah, you can have an executive session depending on what your local rules are at any regular or special meeting. And then lastly, I mentioned an appraisal. So I know appraisals are expensive, but from where you sit, I always recommend to elected officials, if you're buying or selling property, if you can get an appraisal or a broker's estimate of value, or just have your staff do a very arm's length scrub of the best information they can get on value, make sure you get that and use it in making your decision, because that helps protect you from accusations that you're paying too much or you're selling town property for too little. So protect yourself from those kind of allegations by going through the exercise of getting good information on value as best you can. All right, let's flip that coin now and talk about transparency. Transparency is nothing more than a buzzword. It's not a legal word, right? But transparency is important. Citizens, you know, we have some turnout tonight. We don't have a ton of turnout, but citizens are watching, right? And if you don't believe that, then, you know, do things in bad ways, and they'll come out and they'll remind you, right? That if it appears like I don't have opportunities to be heard by the board meeting, or if it's I don't feel like I can get good information, then you're going to hear about it, right? So commit yourself to having good systems of transparency. With being sensitive to time, the only issue I'm going to cover on open meetings is the principal rule about what's an open meeting, okay? So you all, as the elected trustees, are subject to this law we have called the Colorado Open Meetings Law. And what it says, its primary rule is this, and I'm only talking about the Board of Trustees now. If 3 or more trustees meet to discuss public business, that's an open meeting. That means the meeting has to be open to the public. It means the citizen has a right to observe the discussion. So anytime 3 trustees have a meeting to discuss public business, that's an open meeting. The second half of the rule is if a 4th trustee will be there, or it's a meeting at which you're going to adopt any formal action, like adopt an ordinance or resolution or take some other kind of action, then in addition to the meeting being open, you have to post an agenda. That's the 2 main rules. Okay? You can have executive session for limited purposes. Let's talk about a couple of the ways you can get in trouble, and this will help emphasize what the rule is. So 3 or more trustees discussing public business has to be an open meeting. Does that mean that 3 board members can have a meeting before the meeting? Let's take our agendas and go down to the coffee shop and figure out how we're going to vote. That's a violation, because that meeting is not open to the public. Okay? You hold an executive session for purposes not listed, and you veer off topic. Be very careful of that. Recognize that if you go into executive sessions to talk about a purchase of real property, you need to stay on topic. Don't pivot and start having a discussion of a personnel matter. We all are responsible to each other to police that. And it's just as simple as saying, I think we're getting off topic, let's get back on topic. Okay? Because there are laws around that as well. If the mayor has a barbecue, you have a great barbecue every year, right?
He hasn't invited me.
He didn't invite me. That's intentional. He didn't invite you, but he invites the other 6 trustees, and it's purely a social gathering. Is that an open meeting? No, because the state statute does not apply to social gatherings. So you all don't, lose your right as private persons to have a social gathering. And what about 3 of you bump into each other in the coffee shop, and some citizen sees you over there and goes, there they are, they're at it again, violating the open meetings law. Have you violated the open meetings law if 3 of you just end up being physically present in the coffee shop? No. Yeah, the crux of the rule is a gathering to discuss public business. So the statute expressly recognizes that it doesn't apply to social gatherings and it doesn't apply to chance meetings, as long as neither of those morph into a board meeting, right? So just keep those points in mind. The other way you can get into trouble, and this is why I made my comment earlier about the citizen comment period, we do have rules that say when you do your agenda, you need to include agenda information where possible, right? So we should not be adding particularly big policy issues or big decision items to the board agenda the night of the agenda. Think of it just in basic terms of surprise, right? That's how we manage the risk. Would someone be surprised if we added this item to the agenda and made a decision? And if the answer is yes, then we definitely shouldn't do it. Because that's part of what your obligation is, to provide process and give people an opportunity to hear about things. So you can get in trouble in the meetings law by adding high profile or impactful items the night of the meeting.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
When we go to the CML,
Yeah.
sometimes we rent a house.
Yeah.
If we're all there for the CML,
Yep.
is that okay?
Are you having discussions of public business?
Well, that's, I mean, the citizens could say we are, even if we're not. You know?
Okay, yes, but let me ask you, are you?
No.
Okay, then you're not violating the law.
We're just eating
Right.
the steak.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, but
Huh?
the
We're
impression,
just eating good steak.
Yeah, we
yeah,
can,
the impression can be left, right?
Okay.
You know, I've learned over the years that every community's got this tolerance. Let's use the example of the board meeting's over and you all decide, let's go over to the, hey, it was an early meeting, let's all adjourn over to the restaurant and have a cup of coffee together. Every community's got a tolerance on the impression issue, which is separate from the legal issue, right? And if you, the board, are saying, we just don't wanna leave that impression, then don't do it, right? And on the other hand, if it's purely social, I also commend you to view it as a learning opportunity for the citizen, right? Person's over there, hey, there they are, they're at it again. Hi citizen, how are you? Oh, yeah, just wanna make sure you understand that we're not, we're just having a social gathering. Or we're just having chit-chatting about the Rockies, or whatever, right? So that they understand that rule is in place too. No, you are allowed to go to CML conferences, educational opportunities. You just can't have a board meeting up there unless you properly notice it, right? And people have different risk tolerances on whether or not they have board meetings out of town, right? 2 years ago at CML, I had an emergency matter come up, and one of my towns actually did call and hold a special meeting up in Breckenridge during the CML conference. But I reminded them all, hey, I get the fact that if we don't act before the next board meeting, we're gonna be out of contract on this real estate matter. But you need to understand the impression that's gonna leave. So when you have that meeting in Breckenridge, short, on point, take care of business, be done, don't be lingering, don't bring up new topics, wait till you get back to town and do all that. Yeah. Go. Okay. Yeah, but the two main rules are the meeting has to be open and you have to post the agenda. Yes, sir.
Is it okay? Sometimes we have some areas that are, I guess, within the administrative preview, but a little bit probably should go for the board. I don't know, say there's a $20,000 sewer line fix.
Yeah.
Sometimes, I will just call the trustees and say, hey, let me know we had a water line break. This is probably going to be the cost. I just want to give you a heads up. Without necessarily, I'm not taking a vote or a tally, I'm letting them know per se, and where does stuff like that run into? Because obviously I wanna honor them if there's a huge thing, because that's huge for a small town. But, so how does that work when I just call them individually? Obviously I don't email them as a whole, stuff like that, unless it's just I'm telling them something, but.
Yeah, I think the question is whether it's an FYI or whether authority is actually needed. So my third bullet here, right, this is just that issue. So let's say we've got an urgent need to approve a contract to repair a water main break. But the board doesn't meet till next week. The suggestion is made, hey, Paul, just call each of the individual trustees, and if they say it's okay, then go ahead and spend the money. The actual legal question involved there is the expenditure something the board has to approve, or is it already within Paul's purchasing limit? If it's already within Paul's purchasing limit, then really it's not a poll. You're not calling people to give votes. You're calling them just to give them a heads up that, hey, I gotta make an expenditure and just wanna let you know.
But it would have to be an emergency, right?
Yeah, yeah. So, in that situation, if our local rules said that expenditure was one that requires board approval, then we need to have a board meeting to do it. To cover emergencies, some municipalities will adopt an ordinance governing emergencies. And they'll say if it's truly an emergency, they'll define what that is, and it's declared by the proper procedure. Usually the mayor would declare an emergency, like the 2013 flood, okay? Then that gives staff extra authority, or gives somebody extra authority to spend some money. Those are usually coupled with a process that says, but the board will convene as soon as possible after the emergency's been declared to take up any business items. But it does sort of So that's something to think about if you need that or not, you know.
Sure, I think it's in our policy.
Yeah. So if two board members meet with the town clerk, is that an open meeting? No, because, staff is not counted, it has to be 3 or more trustees, okay, so we don't count staff in that. What if 3 of you just attend a county commissioners meeting? So you decide, I wanna go over to Morgan County, they got some interesting item on the agenda, and the 3 of you go drive over there together. Is that a town board meeting? Does she need to post an agenda and say that that's a town board meeting?
I would say yes.
Yeah, it ultimately depends on what happens over there. If the 3 of you go just as passive participants, just listen what's going on, you have not had a discussion of town business. So you haven't triggered the meeting rule, and you wouldn't be obligated to post a town agenda. On the other hand, if the 3 of you go over there and we say, we're going over to the county commissioners meeting because the 3 of us are going to discuss with the commissioners the pending IGA that we've got, then that is a meeting of the town board, right? And that's one where we would need to post an agenda. Okay? So there's little tricky issues that come up. Just so you know, some communities, they'll say they'll do a calendar and they'll list every possible meeting you could ever be at. Right? And do you do that kind of thing? Kind of a sunshine calendar?
No,
Okay.
but Pat does usually about a month and a half in
Yeah.
advance and post, just the Christmas committee as an example, 2
Yeah.
or more board members may be present, 4th of July, 2 or more board members may be present, so. Or
Yeah,
3 or
well, the
more.
committee is something you created, right?
Mhm.
That's your committee?
Yep.
Yeah, so they're subject to the rules in their own right,
Mhm.
right?
Yep.
Yeah, it's sort of a glib way of looking at it, but when people ask me, is this board or committee subject to the open meeting rules, I'll say to the elected officials, well, okay, who created this? We did. Okay, well then it's subject to open meeting rules because it's a committee of the town. Right? You wouldn't have the most, I'd be cautious about doing an over-inclusive calendar because it can leave the misimpression, from a citizen's perspective, they'll go, oh, I see that you posted notice of a board the board at the Rotary meeting next week. That's on your board calendar. Does that mean I need to go to the Rotary meeting because the board's gonna have a board discussion there? You can see how that can kind of whipsaw, right? But make sure you honor your obligation to post a notice and have your meetings in open, right? One last thing about the open meetings law is it says that a meeting is any kind of gathering to discuss public business convened in person, just like this, by phone or by email. What fun is that, right? So just remember that if 3 or more of you are having email discussions about public business, that's also an issue under the statute and you shouldn't be doing that. And I gave you a handout explaining email guideline for elected appointed officials. That's sort of my crib sheet. Email's a great thing, but email also is a different thing for elected officials because you are public officials and you've got to be attuned to these rules. So that explains what that rule is and gives you some suggestions on how to use email effectively. Okay?
And I guess all of our board have a designated town email.
Yep.
If they are emailing a citizen or another trustee, I would assume for purposes, because that could be subpoenaed, they should always do that on their email, not a personal email, on their city email.
Yeah, for open meetings, circling back to the beginning, remember that this is not an open meetings law, it's an open records law. We have another statute that basically says, in general, correspondence of elected officials, that's you, is a public record. So be circumspect in your use of email. Don't say in an email what you wouldn't want to say in a public meeting. That's just a good way of looking at it. We've had cases where people are saying, I want an email. If you're at home and you're using your personal computer, but let's say mayor writes an email to the town administrator that says, I've read the budget and here are my thoughts on funding priorities for 2019. Is that a public record? He produced it on his home computer. Yeah. On the other hand, let's say he comes to town hall and your phone battery died and you say, Paul, can I jump on your computer real quick, I need to send an email. to my relative about a visit to the doctor that I've got to make next week. You send that email out. Is that a public record because you made it on a town computer? No. Yeah, yeah, so the whole issue is what is the email about? It doesn't matter what device it was created on. If it's an email that's made, maintained, or kept by the town or you as an elected official, or it concerns public money, then it's gonna be a public record. On the other hand, if it's purely private, then it's still gonna be private, even though you may have generated on a town machine. But I'm sure you got rules that basically say, use these machines as an elected official, do that whenever possible, that helps protect you, right?
Unless you're running for president, right?
What? It seemed like a good idea at the time, right?
My board
I know, I've been looking forever for that. There was some news snippet, this idea of having two devices, and the comment was, it seemed like a good idea at the time. I just haven't been able to find, it's gonna work it into my presentation. Whenever possible, use your town issued device. I know it can be a little difficult because somebody called me on my home phone, and now if I wanna shoot them an email, I gotta go find my town computer. But do that if you can. If you get into that practice, it protects you, because then if we ever have a real hairy situation where we get caught up in legal wrangling, if I can have you as a trustee say, under oath, that I universally use my town machine for town business, then you're in a much better place, and you're much less at risk of having your private devices subject to a subpoena. Okay. Now, in the end of the day, it's not the end of the world, because even if your private device is subpoenaed, we still could probably get a protective order to protect the private stuff. But it's a little disheartening, right? To have other people taking swipes of your home computer, right? But that's what happens in discovery these days. All right, enough about dark skies on electronic discovery. Let's talk about ethics. Oh, last thing on open meetings, it says the state statute says you have to have an open meeting whenever you meet to discuss public business. What is public business? That's not defined in the law, but here's a good way to look at it. Anytime 3 or more of you want to have a discussion of a policy matter that's currently pending before you as a board, that's when you have to have an open meeting. Okay? If he sends out an email that says, board members, who can make the work session next week, and all 7 of you start sending emails around and say, I can't make it, yes, no, that's not the violation I worry about, and that's not what the law is intended. It's intended to say that your policy discussions need to occur in open meetings. Okay? All right, ethics, let's just keep things moving along. I've got a handout here. Let's work on the handout. So ethics are very important. You're all now subject to the Colorado Code of Conduct, which sets rules for government officials on ethical matters. Very important to get a working familiarity with what the rules are. And I recommend giving you some resources at the bottom of the page. I recommend do that. Don't view Code of Ethics as something to be scared of or a trap. If you have a working familiarity with it, actually these things are your best friend, because they also not only help you, define what your expectations are, but they protect you if we are operating within the proper bounds of the Code of Conduct and have a working familiarity with that. Then when somebody makes this wacky allegation that you're doing something unethical, then we can remind them, no, we do have a Code of Conduct, and here's what it says, and here's what the rules are. So your allegation is out of bounds. So it is important to get a working familiarity with the rules. Recognize that your town attorney's office is available to help you determine what is a conflict, what is not. Just respect the fact that your town attorney is not your own individual ethics advisor. They represent the town as a whole. But they have a working familiarity with the rules. Paul probably got some exposure to the rules. We at Source have exposure to the rules. We can help you, as long as you reach out in advance, we can help you with some thoughts on how am I supposed to deal with this situation. You want to do it before you act. Ethics is one area where it's good to understand whether I need permission or have to recuse. It's not a good place to be to ask for permission after the fact. Better to ask for, to get the issue figured out in advance. So with time being short, I just want to cover the main rule. There are a lot of rules in the Code of Ethics, but I just want to cover three real quick. The primary one, obviously, that comes up for you all is, do I have a conflict of interest, and what do I have to do if I have one, right? So a conflict of interest under state law essentially means this. Whenever you as an elected official, as a trustee, are about to make a decision as a trustee that's going to affect your own personal financial interest, okay, you are in a conflict of interest situation. And what do you have to do?
Recuse yourself. Recuse.
Recuse yourself, what else? What else?
Abstain from the vote.
Abstain from the vote, and what else?
Disclose.
Disclose, abstain from the vote, not participate in the discussion, right? Do we have to leave the room?
Should.
Yeah, let's say we're gonna award the snowplow contract, and I'm on the board, and I actually am one of the bidders, right? You gotta say, mayor says, next agenda item is the snowplow contract, you have to say, there, I need to make a disclosure. I am one of the bidders on this project, I therefore have a conflict of interest, I'm gonna recuse myself from the discussion. Do you have to leave the room? State law does not require you to leave
No.
the room. But, do we typically? I recommend that you do. You know, I'm not so worried about the person with the conflict sitting in the back of the room going, hey. No. But, remember, you have a fiduciary obligation to the town. And what I worry about is, wouldn't the rest of the members feel more free to speak their minds and have a fuller debate if the person with the conflict was not in the room? And wouldn't that be the impression left? So I encourage people, I do recognize that the law doesn't require it, but I do recommend that if you have a conflict of interest, you leave the room during the board discussion. And then the last, a little bit fuzzier piece is, obviously you cannot attempt to influence the other trustees concerning the matter for which you have a conflict at any point. You obviously, by recusing yourself and leaving the room, aren't gonna be influencing that discussion, but you also can't, the night before the meeting, be calling out and say, hey, you know, Mayor, I know that, you know, I gotta bow out because of my conflict, but just wanna make sure I got your vote. That's also illegal and improper influence. You gotta stay out of the issue, right? So,
What do you do in a situation where, let's say Mac is trying to open a liquor store?
yeah.
And he needs to recuse himself, but the board may have questions of the owner and he's the only owner. Does he need to have a representative come speak before, or can he go in the audience and can the board call him up for questions related, or a quasi judicial matter?
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, both are gonna be probably okay, but you are exposed, if what you're saying, could be interpreted as influence. So I encourage elected officials who have a conflict of interest to get a representative to speak for them,
Okay.
right? And if it's absolutely necessary, that they do have to respond, it's like just the facts, just the verifiable facts. But we do this all the time with elected officials, and I always remind them, hey, if you got the conflict, it's better for you to recuse, leave the room, and if it involves your own property, then have a representative represent your interest for you. And I have heard, and to be fair to you, I have heard people say, but that's not fair, you know, any other licensee or applicant, they don't, you know, they can call up the building department, or they can call up the clerk and ask questions and talk about their application. And the gentle reminder I have for them is, not every applicant's an elected official. And so that's just part of with the privilege goes the burden, right? So protect yourself in that regard, as best you can. And it really is for your own protection to do that. In the middle of the page, I got a little bit of a explanation of what it means to hold a financial interest. So in my example, you know, I'm the one in front of the board who wants the snowplow contract, that's a conflict of interest. If it's a company that I own, still a conflict of interest. If it's a company, maybe I don't own it, but I'm on the board of directors, that's still a conflict, right? So all these kind of derivative interests can also trigger the conflict of interest rules, okay? Any questions, thoughts on that? On the back page, I've got a whole bunch of scenarios about conflict of interest. And what I'd like to do is finish the slides, and then if we want to talk about any of them, we can. But they're there for you to just think about, and I think the answers pretty much become self-evident if we think about how the rules might apply. Let's see, let's talk about gifts, right? It's the, you know, in your local government service, it's the big bucks you make, right? It ain't the big bucks and it ain't the lavish gifts, right? That bring us to public service, nor should they be, right? But I just want to remind you that we do have rules under state law that apply to you as elected officials about the gifts that you can receive. I've boiled it down to one sentence just in this presentation. You know, we could come back and do a lot of work on ethics if we wanted to do that. But here's the one sentence rule on gifts. Don't accept any gift of more than $59 from any one person in any one year if it's connected to your role as a trustee. Okay? The one huge caveat to that is I don't care what it's worth, right? Don't accept it if it's clear it's being offered to you to influence your vote or to reward you for a vote that you just cast. So what's an example? Well, we got a subdivision application on tonight's agenda and the $35 gift basket shows up on your doorstep from the developer, right? The night of the meeting. Hey, you know, trustee, thank you for your support. Enjoy the food. You know, that's not the gift you're going to keep. That's the one we're going to send back, right? So just keep that in mind. And remember that those are objective standards. We may look at it and go, oh, it feels right to me. You got to get outside yourself and say, what would another party think of this? So if it doesn't feel right, send it back.
Let's say, here's the gift basket, Merry Christmas.
Yeah, I know what you faced. You know, this is a staff issue too, because you may get gifts, and if they appear to be being given for the wrong reason, then what we encourage people to do is you call back and hey, we get it, you know, but we're the ones subject to the rules, and maybe they live in a universe. There's a lot of industries where that's just the norm. Everybody gets a gift, right? But it can't be the norm in public service. So we encourage staffs to say when those come in, if it's over $59, or if it's for the wrong reasons, we contact them and say, you know, that was a very nice gesture. Thank you for the gift, but we can't accept it. May we donate it to charity on your name, or maybe we do something else with it.
Yeah, a perfect example, that's why we were negotiating the Bank of West loan. They had all their CEOs and business people that were gonna make the decision on the loans at the Wyoming Fair, and they had a booth with the country singer and all that, and they offered 2 tickets for me to come down so I could meet them all and make the pitch for the town of Wiggins and to the concert, and I was like, I bet that cost more than $50. And he's like, yeah, there was like 350 each ticket, so I was like, I'll be glad to meet you in your office when you guys get back. So that was the perfect example of, you know, that scenario where, you know, it was there for business, but it also had the side benefit of it.
Yeah. Are any of you active in nonprofits that come in front of the board of trustees? That question comes up sometimes about whether that's a conflict. And there's some rules on that.
We know some people that are in nonprofits.
Right, but you're not a director or an
No.
officer of a nonprofit that's also showing up in front of the board of trustees to say, board of trustees, would you give us some money or something like that?
How about if a spouse is?
Hmm?
How about if a spouse is on a nonprofit?
Oddly enough, the state statute is not expressly address interest of relatives outside of the area of contracts. But if the spouse has an interest in the contract, then it's your interest as well, right? So technically, does that answer the question?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. All right, suggestion 6, be cautious in administrative matters, right? And as a broad theme here, we're going to reach back to sort of this role discipline idea. Remember that inappropriate involvement in administrative matters by members of the governing body could, you know, you're kind of at a gold standard now because we've matured enough as a town and have the resources now that you've got a single point of accountability for administrative matters. He's right here, right? And so, using my board of directors analogy, he's your CEO, right? Use him. You can expect accountability from your CEO, right? But what it means is you've got a single point of contact for all the administrative stuff. And that gives you the benefit of enjoying, hey, we'll be the policymakers, we'll deal with the vision, right? Our organizational structure is such that we have an ordinance that says he's responsible for the administrative stuff, right? So just recognize that if that structure breaks down, we're not being true to the structure that was set up. We're actually kind of going backwards in our evolution from, you know, at some point we were a small town where it was probably just the board and maybe one marshal and one clerk, and that was it, right? But now we've grown up to the idea where we can have and utilize a CEO to do the administrative stuff for us. So recognize that, right? You know, in the big picture, the board's role is probably kind of that overall vision, spend our time up here on vision and legislative priorities, budget priorities. The great spot to be an elected official is working on great long-term things like our budget priorities for the next 5 years. What are our big capital projects? What's our comprehensive plan look like? What's our master plan? All that sort of visioning stuff that only you're uniquely positioned to work on for behalf of your community. Who owns our business, right? Who are the owners of our corporation? Citizens. Yeah, you're the most qualified and best positioned to understand, you know, all these ideas that come in from the community and then translate them to how can we as the leaders of the community put government resources to that. So that's why I encourage you to spend your time on that big picture stuff. And then leave to the town staff the obligation and job to carry out the administrative details of how this corporation operates. Because that's the way your corporation is set up. You establish the overall goals and priority, you give them direction, these are our goals, these are our priorities, these are the limitations on what you could do as staff. Go forth and do great things consistent with the parameters that you all have set up, right? This distinction between, you know, the board's responsibility and then what's administrative, that's particularly important with respect to personnel matters and administrative matters, right? You do, as the board, have an appropriate role in personnel matters, but you're not the HR department, right? Your role is probably limited to setting general personnel rules, right? I think that's what your ordinance says, is that you guys adopt personnel rules. You select and supervise your direct reports. Who are your direct reports? Manager, clerk, attorney, judge, right? I think your rules also say you make the approval for hiring full-time salary. And notice that it says you, and I think I pulled this right out of your ordinances, you approve the hiring, but it doesn't say you supervise, discipline, or manage all of those people, right? Your direct supervision is your direct reports, like your manager, your clerk, and so on, right? So stick to the personnel issues that are yours to handle, like dealing with your direct reports, determining overall personnel issues. I think your ordinances also say that it's the board's job to determine what positions do we have and how many employees overall do we have, right? But remember, you do all that stuff together as a board, right? And don't let your involvement in that big picture stuff delve into dealing with the selection, evaluation, the salary details, the disciplinary matters involving a specific individual who is not your direct report. Avoid the temptation to become an HR manager, right? Or to give individual orders to town employees, right? We covered a lot of that ground earlier. Remember your oath and your town ordinance. This is what's in your ordinances, right? You adopted this back in 2009, I believe. It says, except for the purposes of inquiry, the mayor, the board of trustees, and its members are going to deal with the employees of the administrative department solely through the town manager, and neither the board nor any members of the trustees shall give orders to subordinates of the town administrator. Why do we have that structure? Why did you all pick that structure, right? Well, it wasn't imposed on you, you picked that, and you self-imposed that rule.
It prevents confusion.
Yeah,
And you tell somebody to go do something, and
yeah,
Charlie goes tell somebody to do something, the same person, and they don't know where to go.
yeah. It enables you to do your job better because you got a single point of accountability, right? Right? And you can avoid liability, and you can get accountability, and you can function at a high level. All of those things can be done consistently. I've never had an elected official who gotten snared in one of those. Remember my example about why'd you fire that guy? And then we end up doing depositions with the elected officials, and we find out that they were, you know, kind of this Wizard of Oz situation where they were pulling strings behind the scenes, and then they all got ensnared in an HR matter. It wasn't theirs. It is absolutely true that if you've got a personnel matter dealing with your direct report, you know, the town attorney, you want to do the performance evaluation, you got to do that. That's part of your job. But if it isn't your job, I've never had an elected official, you know, we get all the way through that deposition process and they weren't supposed to be involved in the HR matter. And it all ended up in litigation and they get to the end of that and they say, hey man, that was fun, let's do it again. Nobody's ever said that at the end of litigation, right? So avoid the temptation. Lean on him to deal with the HR matters that are downstream of the town administrator, because that's his job. Come to love that because it protects you and keeps you out of that liability sphere, right, where you can be exposed if you unduly get involved in HR matters that are really delegated to him or below him. Right? Now, on the other hand, can you expect accountability consistent with that? Sure. Right? Oh, you know, you know what, he finds out that I don't mean to pick on Public Works, but I'll do it for my example. He finds out that the Public Works Director is about to be picked up on a felony warrant tomorrow morning. My apologies to the Public Works Director. Is he gonna give you a heads up? Probably. Yeah, you'd wanna know about that before it shows up on the paper, right? Or on the news. But why is he doing that? Is he asking you to come in and resolve that issue? No, he's just respecting the fact that you're the elected leaders of the town and you need a heads up so we can all coordinate our messaging, right, and be on the same page about messaging. But it's not an invitation to take over the personnel issue, right? So if something like that comes up, we're not saying as a board, well, we gotta put that on the agenda and deal with that guy, right? If it's his decision to discipline that person or decide whether to keep him or let him go, that's his decision, right? So, okay. So anyway, that's where you are on that issue. Just to sum up how that ought to work, is remember that while you're a board of 7 individuals, right, and we respect the fact that we each have different goals and priorities, we are not a group of 7 bosses. Right? We are one boss. So resolve to speak with one voice to your direct reports. Right? We've had those situations, we've had meetings, the mayor says, let's give Paul some direction on this, and we go down the dais and you give your direction, and then you give different direction. The mayor says, no, Paul, I want you to do that. And we end up with 5 or 6 different directions. The mayor says, Paul, you got your direction. And?
I go bang my head against the wall, yeah.
You know, he looks at his watch, and he goes, man, because yeah, they are guy. Right? We have to respect as an organization that that's not the good place to leave it. Right? We as a board have to recognize that it's our responsibility, and he's got to recognize that it's also his obligation to push back a little and say, board, I need better direction so that I can carry out your desires as a board. So we need to work that issue a little more. We need to commit to reconciling our differences of opinions as trustees so that we do give clear direction to staff. And all of that can be done consistent with getting accountability as a board, because that's what you expect and deserve. Right? Why am I so hung up on that issue? Because if we leave it with 7 different directions, what temptation does that create? 2 days later, you're in the manager's office going, hey, that was a messed up conversation, or that wasn't clear what we decided as a board, so do it my way. Right? And then another trustee drops by and says, do it my way. Right? We have to honor our commitment to each other to say, no, we as the 7 trustees need to get on the same page. By a 4-3 vote, 5-2 vote, 6-1 vote, I don't care. As long as we as a board commit to speaking with one voice. Right? And we can do that. I know you could do it. Everybody does it, even if we have strong differences of opinion on what the direction ought to be. Okay? And then my final slide before you kind of go back to civics. Suggestion 7, use your power wisely and humanely. Recognize that as government officials and as the elected leaders of the community, you set the tone for the entire organization in terms of how we treat employees, how we treat each other as board members, how we treat the community, right? And always understand that you're perceived as holding the most powerful positions in government, because you do, right? Use your power wisely and humanely in that regard. Use it effectively, right? And be selfish of the fact that as a board, sometimes I need time to make a better decision. Sometimes, you can be resistant and say that's an unfounded accusation, or we're not going to make that decision tonight. We're not going to be able to doing that. But make sure we use courtesy, tact, and diplomacy in our interactions, right? Especially in public settings. and recognize that certain liability risks, particularly like civil rights claims, are often born of bad facts. And I know your job's tough, you know, that sometimes people will poke or try to get you to say something that may not look so good. You know, be patient. I know it's tough sometimes. But recognize that, you know, bad facts can lead to bad situations, right? So avoid acting in a reactive fashion or making decisions off the cuff, because you have the right to take that time and patience to make the right decisions, right? Finally, your board meetings ought not to be an opportunity for kind of a gotcha, you know? You don't want to be showing up meetings like, I got some great secret information, I'm gonna spring it on everybody at the board meeting. That's not working together as a group. It's always appropriate and permissible for trustees to call your manager with a quick question or heads up. Paul, I got next week's packet and I have a question. Would you be prepared to address it? If you have that question, it's probably natural that others might have it, right? So don't approach the meetings as opportunities for gotcha or springing surprises on each other. That just foments dissension, is what I've seen over the years. Use your staff as a resource to help you look good. In this day and age, you know, it's so ubiquitous how we can communicate. If you get the constituent request at home about something that really isn't your particular item as a trustee, use your staff to help you look good. Somebody calls you at home and says, hey, I'm not getting my building permit, when are you gonna do something about that, right? Good response is to say, hey, thanks for your concern, I appreciate it, let me do this, I'll pass your concern on to the town administrator, I'll ask that he look into it right away and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. Do that, and then he's got an obligation to look at it, make sure we understand what it is. Maybe he goes to the building official responds back to the citizen, goes back to Paul and says, hey, I handled that issue, and then Paul circles all the way back around and says, trustee, just wanna follow up, let you know that we did get in touch with that citizen, we got them resolution to their issue. And then next time you see that citizen, you can say, hey, did we get your issue resolved? Hopefully it's yes, right? And that way everybody looks good. You've been armed with information to look good and to effectively handle that. Where it can get messed up is if we take it upon ourselves to try and resolve that question, but it really takes more time and better information to get it resolved. So commit to act as we and not I, act as we as a board to build relationships with the community and staff. Always, you know, approach staff and say, this is we as the board would like to learn more. We as a board are thinking about this. We as, trustees want to hear from you, not always I. So that helps build a strong relationship between the board and the staff and the community. And finally, as I mentioned at the outset, always remember that you're the stewards of the town's best interest and assets. So, with that, thank you very much for everything that you guys do on behalf of the town of Wiggins, stepping up and serving your community. And I hope the training was helpful, and thank you very much.
Thank you for coming out.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any final questions that you have, then happy to take those. Otherwise, we'll forge ahead.
May I have that for my packet?
You're not getting one?
Well, I gave it to him because the slides were not working. So I just need the slides. Yeah.
Wow.
I will. What's your email? Thank you.
And Sam, if I hopefully the board's okay, can I just impose on you real quick, just to, with 74 looking like it's going to pass and we're in the middle of our budget, I'm understanding if there's some liability there that may not be covered by CML. Could you kind of real quick just give a brief synopsis of 74 and as a board, what we need to do to prepare for that as far as increasing our legal budget or what can we expect as a small town of 1,000?
Yeah. I'm hoping you remember what I wrote, because there'll be an article up on the SURSA website tomorrow.
Okay.
I think, by Friday anyway, with a little bit about this. So Amendment 74 is the amendment that proposes a change to the Colorado Constitution. The Colorado Constitution is taking the just compensation provision of the state constitution, not to jump in the weeds, but I always like to give people the actual details of what the question is, so, because you don't hear that all the time in the conversation. The actual change that's being made is the state constitution currently says private property shall not be taken or damaged for public or private use without just compensation. That's This amendment proposes to revise that language to say, private property shall not be taken, damaged, or reduced in fair market value by government law or regulation without just compensation. So it's adding that clause there that essentially creates the potential cause of action that says the government, through some law or regulation, reduced the fair market value of my property, and therefore I'm entitled to just compensation. Okay? We actually have, under current law, a legal theory that already gets at that issue. You know, it's a pretty, this is all what we call takings law, right, or condemnation law. We already have under the law basically three ways that that constitutional provision kicks in. The most obvious and easy one to identify is when you as a town need to go out and condemn someone's property. Let's say you gotta widen the road and you just have to get that piece of right of way to do it. You would go through condemnation proceedings to get that strip of land from the property owner, and you owe them just compensation, right? The other is where you don't actually initiate that process, but you physically occupy their property anyway. Well, in that case, it's called an inverse condemnation claim, and that's where the landowner has a right to basically sue you and say, hey, you essentially condemned my property, but you didn't follow the process. So now they have a claim for what you would have paid them had you initiated the process yourself. That's called inverse condemnation. The third is what we call a regulatory taking, and that already exists under law. It's a theory that some government law or regulation has effectively made it's such that I don't have any productive use of my property. And we see those, for example, to use a real life case, La Plata County a number of years ago redid their zoning, changed the zoning for a bunch of properties, and some of the landowners sued and basically said, by your changes to the land use code and the limitations that you put on what I could do with my property, you've effectively taken my property, and therefore you ought to pay me for my property. That's called a regulatory taking. Okay. The current law in Colorado is that that is a viable cause of action. The property owner can recover if they've effectively been deprived of any reasonable use of their property. Amendment 74, if it passed, the prediction is, and what I think, it's my personal opinion, what it will do is it'll create a wider area of where those types of claims can be brought. Because it will now have specific constitutional recognition that if there's any reduction in fair market value, I can potentially make a claim. Not only just the claims where I've lost all reasonable use of my property. Okay? We got an understanding of that little thumbnail sketch. So as far as insurance coverage goes, Sources coverage is currently, as has historically been the case, we do not cover condemnation proceedings or inverse condemnation cases or regulatory takings. So from a risk standpoint, Amendment 74, if it passes, does have the potential to create risks of liability that will not be covered by insurance. Now, if the claim is a takings claim plus a civil rights claim of some kind, that will trigger coverage, and SORSA would respond to that because of the civil rights claim. But condemnation type activities, taking types of activities currently are excluded. They are kind of a universally recognized exclusion in public entity liability, right? And if Amendment 74 passes, the most common type of claims that would be brought under 74 likewise would not be covered by insurance coverage. What does that mean to your budget? You know, this is one of those things where Amendment 74 might pass and you may never have it, right? On the other hand, it might pass and you may pass some law that you think is fairly innocuous and doesn't have any material impact on property values, and you may get a claim. So it's hard to predict what that would be. I think as a universal theme, what it will probably do is make all municipal governments more reticent, I think, to get involved in regulating areas where the risks are high, right?
What would those be? I guess, so obviously we have those
It-
same.
Probably a
same
little
as
bit community
every
driven. I'll
other
give you
day.
an example of a live one that, probably not touchy just because it's easier to explain. Longmont and Lafayette are heavily involved in oil and gas activity and trying to regulate oil and gas. And so if Amendment 74 passes and those communities, or say any other municipality, try to impose greater setbacks on oil and gas, such that some property owner says, well, now they can't even locate an oil and gas well on my property, that's a taking of my property, you might see an Amendment 74 come, right? Where previously you wouldn't have. This is all setting aside the whole issue of municipal authority to regulate oil and gas. But other examples that have been given are, if you've got zoning and the zoning says in the industrial district you can do A, B, and C. If you amend your zoning code and say, well, use of C smelting plant is not something we want as a community anymore, so we're gonna take that off of the list, one would think it's probably a tough argument to say that just doing that has reduced the fair market value of my property. But some property owner may want to assert that it did. And in that case, Amendment 74 would give them a potential theory to make that argument, right? So the other thing about Amendment 74 is it's only an amendment to the Constitution and does not have any express statement that the General Assembly can adopt any implementing regulation. So we're not really gonna know how it's gonna shake out until some of these cases get brought and go through the court system, right? So, if it passes, I think, you just gotta monitor it, right? Gotta be, as we always are, you wanna be circumspect when you're adopting new regulations that, set limitations on people's property, and just gonna go through the analysis as you do now about, do we have the authority to do this, is this an appropriate regulation? We just recognize now that in addition to all the risks we already have, we're now gonna have an Amendment 74 risk. Okay? Yep. Like I said, I think there'll be something on the social website that I've authored that'll be up tomorrow about that, and thanks again for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
Sam.
you.
Thanks very much.
See you. Thank you.
Good to see you again. Good to see you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Good to see you,
All right,
Sam.
let's get through the agenda and get out of here.
Yeah.
All right. Next item on the agenda is a liquor license renewal, Stubbs Gas and Oil Incorporated.
Sure. Pat, do you wanna present that?
Yes,
Yeah, you've
I-
gotten training on this.
Yes.
I
I was
have.
just
That's
thinking
why.
that. She just got back.
And
Let's
that's why
hear it.
I also made sure I did a staff report in case you wanted to read it. The renewal for Stubbs is pretty simple. I already asked Jennifer if there was any problems at their facility, and they haven't had any issues. And we haven't had the state report any issues to us either, because they are also inspected by the state. So I recommend that we go ahead and renew the Stubbs license.
Okay. That's pretty easy.
That was easy.
Make a motion, or?
Yep.
Move that we renew Stubbs liquor license?
Mm-hmm.
Second that.
Motion has been made and seconded that we renew Stubbs liquor license. Any further discussion? There is none. Roll call, please.
Chris Sandoval,
Yes.
Charles Roll,
Yes.
Jeff Palmer,
Yes.
Brian Becker is absent, Bruce Miller,
Yes.
Pat Musgrave,
Yes.
Mayor McLeon.
Yes. Stubbs liquor license is hereby renewed. The next item on the agenda is the new liquor license for Mariana's Restaurant.
Correct. Once again, I did do a staff report on this. This one's a little bit different, just because it's new. We did make sure to check the boundaries. Usually the boundaries are 500 feet from any school or any other retail liquor. So we did, just in case, we did check the the feet between Mariana's and Louis, and it's 873, which gives you plenty of room, but it didn't really apply, but I still wanted to make sure we covered our bases in case anybody asked. They will also be subject once we pass their application. It has not been sent to the state yet. I've waited for your approval, and then it'll go to the state, and then they have to follow all of their inspections and all of that. So I did ask them or left them a message to come tonight if in case you had questions, but I never heard back from them. So
As a restaurant, you take liquor from that restaurant home?
no, you cannot.
know, like-
It has, yeah,
Yeah.
you have to consume it there.
I think that's what.
But isn't it like if it's an unsealed bottle? Because like when we go to Olive Garden, you can take one out of there.
You can.
Yeah, and yeah, you can. You can take a full bottle as long as it's
So no,
not
in Fort
open.
Morgan, you can't do it.
And
'Cause they changed the
there are
liquor
some
laws.
restaurants that both have a consumption license and also a retail sales license, and that may be a possibility. And
Huh?
you know, also Greeley is not a statutory community; they're home rule,
They're home
and so
rule.
there may be some other things that they could do within that. So that might be why you see the difference there.
Right, and they're applying for their packet specifically is applying for restaurant,
Okay.
so not a retail.
Okay.
So you have to drink it there or leave it. Sorry. But like I said, they haven't gone through the rest of the inspection process yet, so we can approve it and send it forward, and then they have to go through the inspection from the state and pass their rules that are more strict than ours.
Okay.
And I asked Jennifer if Mariana's had any issues, and they have not had any reports of any issues either.
Okay. I make a motion that we approve the liquor license for Mariana's Family Restaurant.
Second.
Motion has been made, seconded, that we approve the liquor license for Mariana's Restaurant. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Chris Sandoval,
Yes.
Charles Roll,
Yes.
Jeff Palmer,
Yes.
Brian Becker is absent, Bruce Miller,
Yes.
Pat Musgrave,
Yes.
Mayor McLeon.
Yes. The liquor license for Mariana's Restaurant is hereby approved. Okay. Next item on the agenda is the discussion on the November 14th Board of Trustees meeting and 2019 meeting calendar.
Sure, Mayor and Trustees, I will not be able to attend the November 14th meeting. So either two things I can put, if there's some items on the agenda you guys want to meet and discuss, could put those on the agenda if you let me know what those are, or we could cancel the meeting if you want to cancel the meeting. There's nothing specific pending. I've kind of got everything organized to hit the next couple meetings anyway. Pat and I are going to be working on budgets pretty well for most of November. So that's the first item. And the second item, I just really briefly want to talk to you. In December, every year we have to bring a resolution stating our meeting dates and times and places that we're going to have. So Pat has authority to post those. Currently, our organizational ordinance says our regular board meeting shall be held on the second Wednesday of every month. And so we're required to have one per month. I want to chat with you. I want to throw a concept out at you just so we can have more times and maybe get some more things in detail. The scenario would look like, if the board is available, if we could meet at 6 o'clock once a month and do a workshop before the 7 o'clock meeting where we can kind of talk about and discuss items that would come up on the next board meeting, and then go into the 7 o'clock regular board meeting, because we have to do it at 7 to make decisions on ordinances and resolutions, and just have that one meeting a month as our regular board meeting. That would allow me a little more time and my staff to prepare actually a little bit more thorough reports and look into things a little bit deeper, because sometimes, a lot of times we leave the meeting, we go to Friday, the week's over, and the next week we're trying to finish up the stuff from that meeting, then all of a sudden we got to put another agenda out that following week. And so a lot of times I wish stuff could be thorough. Then what we would do is hold on the fourth Wednesdays of each month, instead of having our regular board meeting as needed, we would hold a special meeting. And for instance, that would be something we know we're going to spend 3 hours on, so we're not here to 3 o'clock at night. So that could be, a lengthy executive session. An example would be the budget. Instead of mixing that in with all the other stuff, it would just be a special meeting and deal with the budget on the 4th. So I want to throw that concept out with you guys and see what you think about that. and that would start in January, obviously. So basically, one meeting a month, start a little bit earlier. It might go a little bit longer, then as needed, as issues come up by board members or issues come up by staff that, you know, we need some special time, you know, water sewer system, budget, things along that line, then we would just occasionally have a special meeting, but not necessarily, you know, we may end up with 3 or 4 a year instead of 12, maybe 6. You know, just depends on what's going on.
I'm okay with it.
Yeah, too.
Makes more sense.
Yeah.
You okay with that, Charlie?
Well, I'm willing to give it a try.
I'm willing to give it a try.
Sure.
Then, you know, kind of some of the expectation if we do that, because obviously we'll have some more stuff in the meeting, is, you know, I really would need board members to come to me in the office with, you know, things that as they're coming up on the agenda, if there's some concerns that we can do some research ahead of time, and that might allow me to get more information, so we're not guessing on things or having a lot more back and forth that doesn't get us productive. So I would just ask board members, you know, please take the time to come visit with me, you know, before, you know, not 3 days before the meeting, but, you know, we had one meeting and we know we're gonna talk about this at the next meeting, you know, a week or two before the meeting, come visit with me and say, hey, you know, I have some of this information, can you put it in the packet? I've done some research, or could you do this research and maybe try to put that in the packet? And I think that would allow us to get more information to you guys.
Okay.
So we'll try that. It looks like everybody's okay with that, so that decision actually we come at the December meeting when we do the budget. And just looking ideas to make sure we can make sure you guys again are getting at that higher level, be more productive. November 14th meeting, if you would like to cancel that, someone would need to make a motion to do that.
I'll make a motion to cancel November 14th meeting.
And I'll second.
No hesitation.
Tell us how you really feel.
Seconded that we cancel the November 14th meeting. Any further discussion? Seeing none, roll call please.
Chris Sandoval.
Yes.
Charles Roll.
Yes.
Jeff Palmer.
Yes.
Brian Becker is absent. Bruce Miller.
Yes.
Pat Musgrave.
Yes.
Mayor McLeon.
Yes. Approval of the November 14th, cancellation of the November 14th meeting is hereby approved. Okay. And you've also got the heads up on the 2019 board calendar then?
Yes, so that'll come through with the budget into December once I have that in there. We with the November 29th, if the land development, we have a few land development issues coming through, some PDs and things like that, if they get me the stuff, so that meeting could potentially be a little bit long, but I'm gonna try to get you stuff early for that. If you got any questions, I would encourage you to call me ahead of time before that meeting, so I can maybe try to answer some of those or put some information in the packets, because it will be a pretty busy meeting on the 28th or 29th, whenever that next one is.
Okay. Anything else need to come before this board meeting this evening? No. None? Meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
And thank you, everybody, for listening, participating in that.
Yeah. I'm going home and eat now.